Yo, everybody. My internet has been playing up apparently because it won't let me reply to the chat. Doesn't matter because we're here nonetheless and it says we're live, so I guess we are. Um, Amy was here earlier and she said that she wanted to speak to today's guest about securing potentially a white throat. Not sure if he does or doesn't still continue to work with them, but I guess we'll find out. So, but she's not here anymore. So, hello, Gary. How are you doing, my friend? Should be a good one. All of them are good. You're damn right. Will's excited for this one. Bam's finally catching it. Boom is finally catching it live. Hello, Fee. Hello, Dan. I'm actually really excited for this one. I've had a bit of a bad weekend, guys, so I'm excited to just talk nothing but lizards. Maybe snakes, who knows, but let's try and stick to lizards because we're lizard gang. Hello, Touch. How you doing, my friend? Thank you for tuning in. I am trying to organize crime. No idea what's going on. I am just trying to see who else is here. Hello, Rick. All the way from Canada. Fitting. Hello, everybody. Hello, Mr. Scandinavian Goannas. How are we all doing? Hello, Logan. There's going to come a day where I can no longer do this because there's just going to be too many of you. But for now, thank you very much. Heloderma, yeah. I don't know if I said hello to Jonas, but hello, Jonas. Oh, God, my laptop's freezing. That's right. We're going to talk about venomous lizards. Not only monitors, but other true venomous lizards. That's right. Hello, Matt. How are you doing? Amy is here now. Hello, Amy. Also, just whilst he's here, Will and I are going to race to 2,000 subs on YouTube. So if you're not subscribed, subscribe to this goddamn podcast right now because he's 100 ahead of me, right? And my Instagram following is massive compared to his. So the fact that we're behind is despicable. So go and subscribe. Yeah, okay, that's it. Cool, perfect. All right, remove Will. Let's do a bit of housekeeping. And then let's get straight into this podcast. So shout out to the Bug Factory. Everybody that's been following me for a while know that I support them and they support me. If you want to use Pools-Monitors-5 for your first order, you get 5% off for your first order of live food. And they're already the cheapest live food that I found in the UK. Excuse me, shouldn't have had a Lucas before this. Go and check them out. Sustainably growing mealworms. I was tempted to use these for isopods. Whether it would work or not, who knows? But I was very tempted to actually use these for isopods. But yeah, check them out. They've got little carbon filters in to neutralize the smells. My son is absolutely obsessed with bugs at the minute, and he loves playing around with the grow pods. So that's pretty cool. It could be a cool present for your kids. Right, what else is the chat saying? Oh my god, we need a new laptop. Go and subscribe to the Patreon. I'll be racing. Best believe that your boy's gonna post daily shorts. I'm not. I've unsubscribed to Will. Sick. Perfect. That's what we need. We need Paul's monitors to be number one. That's it. This is what we need. Let's start a trend. Hashtag it, everybody, on the new threads, whatever the don't swear yet, Paul. It's called. Anyway, next massive shout out. Shout out to all you guys. Shout out to the Patreon. Thank you ever so much to everybody that supports me. For as little as £2 a month, you can join the private Discord and you can listen to me talk about stupid stuff. And I share things on there that I don't share publicly. So there are some things, for example, Reggie Boy, people on Patreon know about Reggie, whereas the rest of you don't. So if you care to figure out who Reggie is, consider checking me out and other stuff that may or may not. And there is also a massive surprise that Patreon don't even know about. But Patreon will know first. Whether it results good, bad, or ugly, Patreon will know first. But let me tell you, it's a massive surprise. All hail King Paul. I'd never unsubscribe to glorious King Paul. You're damn right. The video spamming begins. Will's going to get there before me, man. The man makes so much better videos than me. I only have two options tonight. Listen to Paul's voice or look at Lizard Corn. Ah, big brain in the reptile room. You best know that the lizards are going to be right up to corn with your boy's voice. Anyway, without further ado, everybody, let's get this show on the road and introduce this week's guest. Those people may or may not know him from the social page, which we're going to get into, High Desert Herps. But also from the pages is Mr. Bryan Whitehead. Hello.
Hey everybody.
How you doing?
Good, man. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm not bad. I am not bad. I'm quite hot actually because I don't tell you this, but this is in my loft. And it's quite hot in the UK today, so it is quite hot. So if you see me profusely sweating, please excuse me. But other than that, I'm all right. How are you?
Good, man. Good. It's hotter than hell here too. We're in our hot phase, so been over around 105 every day for the last week. So I know all
Jesus
about
Christ.
being real hot and warm.
What part of the states are you in?
So I am in southeast Washington State. So I always tell everybody Washington State, and they're always like, "Oh, it's so nice and pretty where you live," and I'm like, "Nope, not pretty whatsoever." So I'm in the desert of Washington State. We actually get 1 inch less rain a year than Phoenix, Arizona. So we do get snow in the winter, so we still get more precipitation. But the desert of Washington.
Nice. There we go.
Yeah,
Is that why you got High Desert Herps?
that's right. Yeah, yeah. Kind of
Right.
fits the geographic area.
Okay. Well, I didn't know if it'd be to do with the species you kept, but we'll get into that in a second. We're just gonna
A little
jump
bit of both.
a little
Yeah.
bit of both. Okay, we'll get into how the name and so basically everybody, just as a quick summary before we get into this quickfire questions. People that do or do not know, Bryan is a full-time reptile keeper breeder, and we're going to talk about how he got into it, the story, basically how it all started, and then what it really takes to become full-time reptile breeder. So buckle up. Any questions on that sort and anything about, we're going to get into the species he keeps and the bits and bobs that he works with and some of the little nuances that he's found and what makes a good pet to breed for the hobby and all this other stuff. But yeah, for now, it's the quick fire questions. So last week's guest spent about 55 minutes on this. Every other guest spent about 5. So let's see how it goes. So short or as long as you like, but they're supposed to be short. So snakes or lizards?
Shoot, that's tough, but definitely lizards for me at this point.
Money or time?
Oh, time for sure.
Mentally strong or physically strong?
Mentally.
Wild caught good, wild caught bad?
Ooh, heated debate topic right out of the gate.
You can elaborate if you want, because a lot of people feel like they have to.
I'll elaborate a little bit on this one. Wild caught bad in 95% of situations. I don't think that the average keeper should be keeping wild caught. You should, if you're looking for a pet or you're looking for, you know, you're a small time keeper, something like that, even a small time breeder, you should, and you have the ability to get captive bred, you should 100% of the time be getting captive bred. We don't need to be pulling animals out of the wild that don't need to be pulled out of the wild. With that being said, there are some species that it would be nice to establish in captivity or that aren't available in captivity that I do feel like some of the bigger breeders should continue to work with. So a little bit of a mixed answer, but for the most part, wild caught bad.
Yeah, I pretty much 100% agree with that. Pro snake rack, another controversial topic, or no snake rack?
Oh man, you're gonna probably get me in trouble with your listeners on this one. I'll say pro snake rack. I'm a breeder that, as you pointed out, does this for a living. I think there's definitely stipulations to that. I think they can be abused and neglected, but there are definitely situations where I think snake racks, and especially for breeders, are okay.
Okay, we will get into that later.
Sure.
Arid species or tropical species? High Desert Herps is on the ropes now.
that's tough. If I had to pick one, probably arid species.
Yeah,
But that's tough.
that's a good question.
Yeah.
So because, well, long story short, my girlfriend Fiona in the chat, she picks 2 random animals for every single guest. So
Okay.
your 2 random animals to choose between are penguins or cuttlefish.
Oh man.
Random animals, man.
I'm a scuba diver, so I'm going cuttlefish.
There you go. They're pretty cool animals, cuttlefish, to be fair.
Yeah.
Big reptiles or small reptiles? And when I say big reptiles, I'm talking snakes over 10 foot, lizards over 4 foot.
If I could keep only one and choose only one to keep, I would keep a big reptile. But I think small reptiles are much more realistic for most keepers.
Big monitors or small monitors? Again, we're classing a big monitor 4 foot and above, small monitor just shy of 4 foot and below. So tree monitors would be small monitors.
My favorite species are still big, but I would say, again, smaller, a lot more realistic to, to keep in captivity for most people.
I agree. I think slowly becoming my favorite species of Gilleni, the pygmy mulga monitors.
Really? Huh. Interesting.
I won't get into it. We're digressing.
We'll
We
talk
won't
a little
get
more about that, I'm sure. It's been a tricky
okay.
species for me, but
you keep them, yeah?
I do, yeah.
I'll just elaborate quickly on this. I've had mine since January. I brought a proving group. Just had my first 5 clutches.
Cool.
1 clutch from one female, 1st of June. 45 days later, she double clutched. Second female was the 3rd of June. 43 days later, she double clutched. Third female laid on the 1st of July. So I'm anticipating 45 days later, she should double clutch. So we're talking mid-August. I should expect another clutch from her. But we'll get into Gilleni because I think they're one of the best pet monitors, like full stop. But yeah, where was I? Instagram famous or YouTube famous, which is, we've already sort of spoken about this, but for the public.
Oh, neither. If I had to pick one, I guess YouTube, but that definitely not my cup of tea, neither.
Okay, now this is the make or break whether we're gonna have a good chat or not.
Okay.
Pro Crocs or no Crocs?
Oh hell, Pro Crocs, man. I've got several pairs.
Yeah.
My wife found a pair on sale for like $20 the other day. They were tie-dye. I guess that's why people didn't like them. So I was like, yeah, grab me a couple pairs of those bad boys for $20.
See, I knew I'd like you. So we
definitely Pro Crocs. Definitely.
I say to a lot of people on my Instagram that you can't handle monitors unless you're wearing a pair of Crocs. So there you go.
Nope. They're perfect. They shit on you. You just wash them off. You hose them off. It doesn't matter.
And when you deal with a feisty animal, you can just put them in sport mode and you're good to go.
There you go.
Speaking of feisty or tame.
Wow. I kind of like feisty. Tame are nice too, but I don't know. Feisty are fun. Both, all.
Everything, whatever I can get. Last two, wild types or morphs?
Wild types, generally.
Every day.
Some morphs.
And then finally, the worst experience you've had with crickets.
Oh my God. I hate crickets. This is like you just struck a nerve. I guess I must not be the only one. This must be every single monitor keeper. I don't know. I've had so many bad experiences with crickets. At least 2 times I've dumped full 1,000 bin crickets on the floor, and you just unfortunately. Sometimes you got to make the decision. It's like, okay, do I just start stomping? Do I try and catch them? Do I grab a vacuum? And yeah, it's a nightmare, man. So but yeah, I'd say just dumping a full 1,000 bin thing right on the floor is about the worst.
God help.
But it's happened more than once, unfortunately. I hate to admit it.
Yeah, I avoid crickets at all costs. Like at all costs, I don't buy them unless I absolutely have to.
I get crickets generally every week. I've got enough babies. They like, fast moving small stuff.
Yeah.
But what I just did actually last week, I used to have a red runner colony, and this was several years ago when I was smaller than I am now. And I just got sick of sorting them and stuff. It just seemed time consuming, and I didn't have enough babies. It just wasn't worth it back then. but I actually just bought 5,000 last week, and I'm going to start red runners so that hopefully I can get to maybe crickets like every other week or once a month. And they're just so annoying. I can't stand them. And once they start dying, I mean, you have to feed them in a day or two because they just crash so fast.
Yeah, and they stink as well once
And they
they start
stink.
to. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yuck.
Okay.
I'm
So
glad I'm not the only one.
yeah,
Now we're just being each other's shoulders to cry on, right?
Yeah, man. I don't buy them. I've recently just got like a little box for my new little animal that is a cricket eater. It's not a monitor, it's a gecko. So
Okay.
we do have, for the UK it's a bit different because we get grasshoppers as a staple, like easily. So I just
That's
haven't had a
nice.
chance to go and get any. But yeah, so anyway, yourself, how let's just start with the species that you keep. We won't elaborate anymore on it. We'll just go through some species you keep, and then we'll go on the journey of how you got to where you are.
Okay. So I group my animals a little bit into 4 different categories. So I got a small collection of New Caledonian geckos. So right now it's just cresties, and then I've got a 1.2 of chihuahuas. I think I've got a dozen cresties or something like that. So I had more for a while. I did Leachianus and Gargs and stuff like that, and just kind of been busy, and they weren't my favorite, one of my big passions. So I pretty much got rid of all my Leachies and Chewies and Gargs over the last year or so, and now I just have a few crested geckos and Leachies. So then the second kind of group of animals that I do is colubrid snakes.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, if we get into and you want to discuss kind of my reptile journey, which I think you do, that's actually where I started with reptiles, was with snakes. So that was an interesting question to kick it off, the snakes versus lizards, because everything for me started with snakes, but I've definitely gravitated towards lizard stuff with legs over the last probably 5 years or so. So the colubrid snakes I keep, kind of a couple different groups. I've got one shed in my backyard that I keep all my dry marcon in. So I've got like
Cool.
a dozen or so dry marcon. I've got some Veracruz locale type rubidus. I bred those this year. Both my females went
Sick.
this year. So I've got
Congrats.
a trio.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. So I got a trio of those. I've got some Guerrero rubidus. I've got a pair of yellowtails, a pair of Texas indigos, and then a trio of eastern indigos as well. So I've got quite a bit of the dry marcons kind of cornered. Those are kind of my higher end, nicer snakes, if you will. And I've been doing the dry marcon for 5 or 6 years now. So some of those animals are just kind of getting up to breeding size. Had a bit of a tough luck with the Easterns, which a lot of people do. But yeah, so those are my dry marcon. And then the other colubrid snakes I keep, I do a few different kinds of bull snakes. Not a ton, just like, a dozen or so. A couple garter snakes, some Lake Chapala garters, some gray banded king snakes, some Mexican pine snakes, both the Pituophis depi and the depi jani. I'm actually working on the depi, the Vivid Line Hypo project. I hatched 3 of those babies this year from a summer and winter phase pair. So I'm really excited about those. That's a kind of a cool project. So those are the snakes I keep. And then probably my second favorite animals and my second favorite project are my helodermas. So I keep 3 species of those. I got the Rio Fuertes, the Heloderma exasperatums, and I have bred those. Most of my Helodermas are still not breeding age yet. I should get quite a bunch next year that are breeding age. I have bred the Rio Fuertes. My female's gravid. She's about to lay eggs any day, actually. And so I think I've got about a half dozen of those. And then I've got the Heridiums, which are just the Mexican beaded lizards. And then I've also got Gila monsters. So I've got probably 10 Gila monsters, half a dozen of the Heridiums. And again, a lot of those are just going to be kind of getting to breeding age over the next year or two. So really excited about those. I love the Helodermas. They're kind of like the snakes or the lizards, the snakes of lizards, or the lizards of snakes, if you will. They're only eat once a week. They're pretty lazy critters, so they don't, they're not like a monitor where you got to have a ton of heat and a ton of space and feeding all the time and stuff like that. They're quite a bit different, but they're still super cool, super fun to work with. And then the last group of animals that I keep and actually is probably consumes about 75% of my time, 75% of my collection at this point in terms of value, and even more so in space and stuff like that. And that's my monitor lizards. And I've actually been doing them probably the least amount of time of anything, which is surprising to me, but it seems like I've kind of hit the ground running with them, and I don't have a real great explanation for it, but I've had a lot of success with the species that I've kept. And these, I love the monitors, man. And I mean, that's probably music to your listeners' ears, but they're just, I mean, they're once, and it's kind of cliche for monitor keepers to say this a little bit, I think, but man, once you've kept monitors, there's just nothing
no
else.
going back. Yeah,
there's no going back. There's nothing. Yeah. There's nothing like it. And I just got my first lace monitor about 6 weeks ago.
Nice.
I continue to be amazed at the new species that I get, and I'm so thankful that I have the ability to work with some of these animals. But man, that just looking into the eyes of that lace, and you can just see the intelligence and just the shift in its demeanor. I also work being that I do this full time, I work in my reptile room pretty much all day, every day. And so when I got this lace monitor, she was pretty shy and pretty nervous, and man, the steps she's come in 6 weeks, and I've got too many animals I don't handle. I don't, I interact, I tongue feed lots of things, everything. And I'm working in my animal rooms all day, so they see me all the time. But just the way she's changed over the last 6 weeks that I've had her is amazing. So anyway, that's just my rant about how much I love monitors. So
no, that's fine. She's a Bells, yeah.
She's a Bells. Yep, she's a Bells.
Yeah.
So just got her not long ago. She's so awesome.
What other species do you have? So you've got lace.
So
Prasinus.
I'll start at the bottom, and I'll try not to forget anything as far as species. So Varanus kingorum. So the other thing is, I'm probably saying all these names wrong. So no, I'm not.
We don't mind. We're not professional here. Don't worry.
Yeah, I'm not a Latin a pro or.
No, what I say to people, as long as you say it with confidence, it doesn't matter.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. So I got Varanus kingorum. I'm trying to establish a little breeding army of those. I've got Varanus primordius. I just got those actually recently. Nice. So I've got those as well. I got Gilleni, Pilbaras.
Okay.
Trying to work up in size here. Red Ackies, yellow Ackies, Varanus tristis orientalis. I'm trying to get my hands on some Varanus tristis as well, but I don't have any of those right now. Kimberly Rock monitors, Varanus gluerti. Varanus Offenbergi. Really enjoy my Offenbergis. I've actually gotten them to produce for me. Yeah, I've got eggs hatching in any day of those. So those are awesome. And and very rarely seen here in the States anyway anymore, and captive bred even less so. So I'm trying to think, is that all the dwarf monitors I have? I think that's all the Odatrias that I have. And then getting up in size a little bit. So going to the tree monitors. So I've got the Prasinus. I've got a young pair of Ursingeri.
Nice.
I've got a couple pairs of Beckeri that I haven't had for too long, haven't produced them yet, but I do have a couple pairs. I've got a pair of Macrii, and then I've got my 2.3 Prasinus as well. So I don't have any Cordenzis. I don't have any of the Bohemii. And I think that might be all, I guess, all I'm missing at this point for the tree monitors.
Yeah, for the most part, yeah.
And then I've got a trio of Mertenses.
Sick.
I've got and they're young too. They're still under a year old, so not breeding age yet. And then I've got I just got a pair of Flavorufus crosses, probably Flavorufus and some Argus in there. Haven't had those too long either. I've got my pair of white throats, which I've had for actually my boy was my first monitor, my male white throat, so I've had them for 5 or 6 years.
Nice.
And then I have the female Bell's Phase lace monitor. And then one of my newest additions that I'm really, really loving, and I've only had for a few months, is my Spencer's monitor. I have a 1.3 of the Spencer's monitors. So I think I got everything, man. I'm not sure that I missed anybody, but if I did, maybe it'll pop into my head as we keep talking.
I'll be 100% honest, right? I know, because obviously we've spoken privately, and you're like, you don't post on socials. So I knew you had Tristas. Yep. I knew you had Prasinus. And I knew you had Kim's. But that was probably all I knew.
Yeah. So like I said, you probably understand a little bit better why I don't post very much, because I would much rather be in there taking care of my animals and digging up eggs and playing with babies and stuff like that than posting on Facebook and whatnot. And I mean, to be frank, like I love my animals. I'm an animal guy through and through. I always have been, but I like sharing my stuff because it's cool and it's fun to let other people see it. But it's also, I hate some of the Facebook debates and blah, 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 that they can get so negative and whatnot. So
that's why I don't use it.
And it just takes up so much time to post stuff, and respond to people, because I feel like when I post something and people ask me questions, I also want to respond. I don't want to be a dick and not, not respond to people. But I've got a zoo that I'm trying to take care of, plus my 3 little munchkins that are even more of a zoo to handle at times. So,
well, I appreciate you finding the time to talk to me then, because obviously you're a very busy man.
Yeah, this is awesome, man. I love this. This is the type of stuff I love, talking about reptiles and stuff like that. So
yeah, I just need to, before we do go into the reptile talk, I just need to ask, out of all of those species of monitor,
yep,
what's your favorite? If you have a favorite.
Yeah, I probably, so if you're asking me, today, I like I was already talking about my lace monitor. I'm really loving her. I love my big monitors. I've loved my white throats from the day I've had them. They are puppy dog tame, and my female was a bit of a bitch when I got her. So you asked if I like feisty monitors. She was not very friendly when I got her, and now, again, I don't handle her. Sometimes I do have to like reach in and grab her, and she still gets a little puffy. She doesn't really enjoy it, but she enjoys her neck scratches and stuff when I reach in. So I love my big species. If you're talking from a business standpoint, like, what makes, good money and breeds well, the smaller species, the Ackies, I mean, they're just like clockwork, and they're so easy to take care of. So they're nice from a business standpoint. But yeah, I love the attitudes of the bigger monitors, and they're just so impressive when you look at them, when you look at them and pet them and interact with them. The lace, like I said, I'm just really enjoying the transformation that she's going through just in her personality. She's still small, but she's, she'll now let me reach in the cage and stroke her chin and stuff like that. So I love that. And then, tree monitors are so amazing too. So how can you go wrong? I can't pick one, but
I know what you
if
mean.
if you're if you're gonna nail me down right now, I would say if I could only keep a pair of one, I would probably choose lace monitors right now, and that's just on my last 6 weeks of having one. So
damn. I see lace are very rare here, very very rare here.
They're a little less rare here now than they were a year or two ago. Some people have had success breeding them and stuff recently, so they used to be pretty darn rare here too. And they're still high dollar, pretty rare animals, but like the Spencers are way more rare here.
Yeah.
You can't get Parentes or anything like that, but they're still pretty rare here, but a little less so it seems like than they were a year or two ago, which is nice. So.
Yeah, for sure. We've only got, to my knowledge, 3 in the whole country.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, there's this guy with a pair who's just had a clutch, but I'll be completely honest, I think it's infertile. I hope it's not. It's not me slating him. I generally hope there's fertile and I generally hatch, but I think he missed the window of vitellogenesis, and I think he put the male in too late. But good signs, got eggs, so if they're not fertile, can only build from it. And then there's a guy that's got a male who lives really close to me, actually. And then, long story short, I won't bore you with the politics, but because UK thinks we're great alone, standalone Britain, we left the European Union, so now we can't get animals from Europe easily. And because lace technically should have never become in captivity, you can't get correct papers for them. So trying to get them here now is an absolute ball ache. So we'll see. But
it's interesting. I don't know all the laws and stuff like that. I don't import or export anything. It's something I may look into in the future, but my understanding too with the Australian species, and I don't know if this is just an Australian US thing, but I believe that no Australian species can cross the US border at all anymore. So like even to and from Canada, Brandon from Canadian Cold Blood and I were having this conversation a couple months back about like pilbaras and anything that comes from Australia, which is a lot of the really cool species. Basically what's in the US at this point is what's here is going to stay here, and unless somebody's illegally smuggling stuff, which obviously still happens, but it's even to and from Europe, to and from Canada, it can't happen anymore. So that's one reason I'm trying my damnedest to keep, like, I've got a group of King Orem and they've been hard to breed, and I think part of that is just genetics and stuff, but I desperately want to keep them going because I don't want them to die out in the States. So
just on that quickly then, do you winter your Gilleni and your King Orem?
So I do. So I naturally have seasonal cycling with everything I keep because they are kept in my big 3-car garage, and things now it's all insulated and stuff. It's done up really nice, but things naturally get cooler in the garage. And then I obviously cycle lights and stuff like that, and I do play with misting and stuff. So yes, I do naturally cycle them. I have gotten a ton of King Orem eggs, and I've gotten a lot of bad eggs, and I've also struggled admittedly with incubation.
I've heard they're really hard to hatch.
Yeah, I struggle in different ways. I get babies that are fully formed and then fail to make it out, and then I get eggs that go for a month and a half and then just die, a month before they're going to hatch. Or I've had lots of things. I've had babies hatch super robust and just eat and smash crickets right out of the eggs, and then I've had babies that just seem, lethargic almost right out of the egg. So they've been a tough species, and I can't help but think that part of that is just their gene pool is relatively shallow. And I do think that, one of the discussions I had with another keeper somewhat recently is that maybe I'm not letting the males get cool enough, because I get way more. I don't get hardly any infertile eggs. Occasionally, like if a Prasinus is bred one of my females that consistently lays me 7 egg clutches, she laid me a clutch of 3 good eggs and 3 bad eggs last time. And that's a sign to me to keep her away from a male for a while.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't get bad eggs very often, except for my King Orem, and I quite often will get full clutches of bad eggs from them. But they're also more like geckos; they'll lay like every 30 days or less,
Yeah,
and they'll
same as
lay
aphids,
the
yeah.
clutches of 2 to 5, for like 5 or 6 months in a row, and then they'll stop for 5 or 6 months.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I think winter. I think a lot of people, a lot of people do sleep on spermatogenesis for males, getting them really
yep,
cold to allow that
yep,
sperm to really become.
yep,
But I think you're probably right. There probably is some sort of fertility issues, and I've heard with Kingorum eggs that people don't dry them out enough towards the
yes.
end, so the babies just drown or they just can't get out. I've never had them, but that's what I've been told. So I assume, I don't know how you're incubating. I don't know if you're using how do you incubate the king's eggs? Yeah, so um
Well,
Mr. Scandinavian Gorannas might be able to help in this instance, but do you use
I
Sims?
Yes, so I've tried both because I've heard that Sims were bad for King Orm eggs.
Mm.
And so I tried drier substrate just using perlite and went a little drier than most of my other eggs. And I've done worse with that than I was doing with Sims for a while there. So I actually just went back to Sims. I think I've got half a dozen king eggs in the incubator right now, and they all seem good and they all seem like they're doing well. So I'm gonna see if this round hatches and but that is something I have played with is drier media. I keep my monitor incubators typically right around 85 degrees Fahrenheit. So,
Yeah, that's what I do roughly. Yeah.
yeah, so pretty standard, pretty typical. I, I seemed like I hatched 4 or 5 really good Kims about 6 or 8 months ago, and from a couple clutches that seemed to just kick butt. And then those babies I've kept and they've done really well. And then I seemed like I had a kind of a lull for a few months, but now I seem like I've got a few good eggs again, and I've gotten a few recently. So, yeah, I've played with some stuff, but they just seem to be um, harder than anything else that I've bred. So,
Fingers crossed. So you have to let me know how you get on because I've had a couple of people tell me different things for different bits. So we won't talk about it on here because we'll talk about it forever. But let me know how they get on, and I'm happy to bounce ideas backwards and forwards with you.
yeah, absolutely.
Just quickly, thank you very much, Franca. Love you as always. Thank you so much for the donation. Like, no comment either. She's just here. She's here for the support.
Awesome.
Yeah. Let's change gear a little bit then. Otherwise, we are going to digress, and we'll get back onto the monitors in a bit. We'll make everybody wait for it. Let's start at the start. So, what age did you start keeping and breeding reptiles?
Yeah, so my background in reptiles is so I'm Canadian, like you and I were chatting about a little bit. So I actually grew up in a super outdoorsy wooded area. Used to hunt for frogs and newts and salamanders and stuff when I was younger, tree frogs, all that good stuff. And so I've loved animals and reptiles and amphibians forever. Um, Moved down to the States when I was 11, and I got my first corn snake in 6th grade. Ended up with a ball python around the same time, and I basically kept snakes for, while I was in up through school, high school, all that stuff. So when I went off to college and university, I actually got out of reptiles. It's kind of a funny story because it came around. I had a friend that ended up taking my ball python that I had since I was in 7th or 8th grade, and he kept it while I went off to college. And it was actually in, I think, my 2nd or 3rd year of college. I ended up in college for 6 years. I'm a chemical engineer by study, so we'll probably maybe talk about that a little bit as we talk about the transition to doing this full time. But it was in college that I kind of got back into, I really honestly didn't realize that there was such a market for these people that bred ball pythons and stuff. And this was back almost, 15, almost 20 years ago now. It's been a while. No, I guess 15 years ago. So between 15 and 20 years ago. And, so I started kind of just getting interested in it back in college, and I started out with a couple ball pythons back when I was back in college again, and kind of got into it. And by the time I graduated university in 2011, I was living with my girlfriend at the time in a tiny little 1-bedroom apartment in Pullman, Washington, which is just this tiny little town in Washington State with a big old university, just a total college town. And we lived in a little 1-bedroom apartment, and I had a snake rack full of ball pythons in our bedroom. So my very patient, very loving wife put up with a full year of having a snake rack of ball pythons while I was in college. And so that's kind of how I first got into the keeping and breeding reptiles. So during that time, I think I ended up with, at one point, I got up to like maybe 70 or 80 ball pythons and boas and stuff like that. And I bred those for a couple years. At that point, I kind of started my professional career, like I told you. So I was a chemical engineer. I suppose I'm still a chemical engineer by schooling. And so I was working in a pulp and paper mill. I had a pretty demanding job. I had the snakes. I was doing, both of those. My wife was actually still at university at the time. She's a little bit younger than I am. So we were living in different towns. And I just got really burnt out. And so I ended up selling everything, got completely out of all reptiles. I made a deal with my wife at the time, well, girlfriend at the time, wife now. I really wanted a bird. I had always wanted a bird. Again, just an animal guy. So I made the deal. Hey, I'm thinking about selling all my snakes. Maybe I could get a bird. And she's like, oh yeah, get a bird if you get rid of all your reptiles. So I ended up with a green wing macaw.
Okay.
Sold all my snakes, got my green wing macaw Zazu. Was out of it for probably 3 or 4 years, but you know what they say, once you have that reptile itch, you always got the itch.
Yeah.
So I didn't have anything for 3 or 4 years, and then when I got back into it, the plan was just get a couple little green tree pythons, a couple chondros. And so I got a couple chondros, and a couple led to a couple dozen. And I got a new job around then, and I became a sales engineer, and I had a couple really good sales years. I got paid salary, but also commission. And so I had a couple really good sales years, and I basically used my commission checks to invest heavily in my green tree pythons. And so this was all about 10 years ago, probably a little bit more than 10 years ago. And so I bought a bunch of green tree pythons, did them for a few years, never really did that great with them. I kept them kind of before the whole Nido thing came out, and I, seemed like RIs. I'd had a couple animals that would get RIs every year, which was a pain in the butt, but that's just kind of the way breeding green tree pythons was. Had some clutches, but didn't do great with them. And then that's when I kind of gravitated and got into my first Eastern Indigos. Is actually what I ended up getting first with the dry mark on. And so the chondro love kind of transitioned into love for colubrids and the bigger colubrid snakes. I did the dry mark on thing, kind of, built that collection up a little bit. And then it was probably about, after doing that for a few years, that I got into and started. I had always loved monitor lizards, and my dream was actually the number one lizard that I always wanted to own was a black dragon.
Okay.
And I didn't know it. Yeah, and I didn't know it at the time, but they're actually illegal to own in Washington State.
Ah.
Um, so I ended up settling on um, and this is, again, obviously, keep in mind, I've taken you through this reptile progression. So when I talk chondros and stuff, I think maybe at the most I ever had for green tree pythons, I think was like maybe 18 or something. So I didn't
Yeah.
have near as many animals as I have now, but it was still a decent sized hobbyist collection, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so it was kind of around then that I was like, I really want to get into monitors. I think they're so cool. I really wanted a black dragon, couldn't get that. So I ended up settling on, I decided I was going to do both a white throat monitor, and I really wanted to do a big display of tree monitors. I've green tree pythons. Green's my favorite color. I've always loved, green reptiles and stuff like that. So Oh, I forgot to add in there in that transgression. So during all of that, I also pretty successfully, God, totally forgot about this. I also pretty successfully bred dart frogs for about 3 or 4 years, and that was a shitload of work. So I had all these chondros, but on top of that, I also did dart frogs for a year, and I would wholesale out hundreds of dart frogs because I had
Jesus
Aruatus
Christ.
and stuff that would. So I've done dart frogs too. Don't do any dart frogs anymore. They were super cool. Now that I do this full time, I would maybe one day like to get back into them, but I'm too busy at the moment. But so I'll just throw that wrinkle in there
No, 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 it's fine.
on top of the reptiles.
My brain's going now. I'm sure there's more to the story in a sense, but my brain right now is going. The question I want to ask you is, like, let me elaborate because I don't know how to
Yeah,
articulate it. So,
yeah,
do you think you were just clutching at anything to try and work with animals, like in the sense that you were like lost, or did you just go, "This is really cool. Let's get into this. This is really cool. Let's get into that."
yeah. No, absolutely the latter. It was. Oh man, and admittedly, I have to slow myself down at times because I still see an animal and I'm like, I got to learn more about this
That's so
animal.
cool. Yeah,
And
yeah,
then
yeah.
once I start researching it, it's like, okay, like how can I make this work? Where can I put this? And I mean, admittedly, it's cool, but it's also a flaw at times because
Mm.
there are times where I'm like, oh, I got to, like, I can't bring in a new animal. So or somebody reaches out to me for a trade, and I'm always like, yeah, I'll consider a trade. Why not? And it's like, yeah, you can't work with something new right now. So
Yeah, I know.
no, it wasn't a um. So maybe to step back a little bit, during all of this reptile breeding, I
Mhm.
think any reptile breeder that does this and spends the money that I spent on reptiles and stuff, they hope that maybe one day there's a return or that it's a hobby that can pay for itself. And there's always the carrot and the vision that, hey, maybe I can do this really well and retire early. So that was always my goal when I was keeping and collecting animals. It was more along the lines of, and I'll be honest with you, I was an engineer. I kind of settled on that degree because I was really good in school. I was really good at science. I was really good at math.
Mm.
I never really loved a job that I had when I was an engineer. I loved my reptiles,
Mm.
So there was always the dream of, hey, maybe one day I can retire early and be doing this well enough and making enough money to, get to a spot where I can retire early. Admittedly, I did not think this was going to happen at 34, and maybe we can elaborate a little bit more on that. But
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
to answer your question, though, no, it wasn't. I want to get whatever I can to make as much money as I can. It
It was
was
just you
I
love
would
it.
get
It's cool.
passionate about something and I would start collecting them. And I have an extremely addictive personality, which again is not always a good thing.
Yeah, me
And
too.
so I just want more.
Yeah,
And
I relate to that.
man, I shit you not, at one point I used to keep track of money that I spent on reptiles, thinking and knowing that maybe one day this could be a business. And I mean, I'm like any other guy. I was like any other guy at one point where I had to ask permission for my wife, and eventually I'm
Yeah,
dropping $5,000
yeah.
or $6,000 on groups of lizards. I would stop asking permission and just, face the wrath of the wife after the fact. But man, I tell you what, there were some sobering days when I'm looking at those six
Yeah.
figure amount of money that I had spent on reptiles and stuff like that. So it's always been a hobby and a passion. I've always hoped that maybe I could return and do what I'm doing now, but it wasn't me collecting reptiles to get there necessarily. It was
Yeah.
more, man, I love all these animals. I just want to have them.
Yeah.
And
And
it's turned into, the business, which is awesome. So the
what
macaw, I
happened?
still have the macaw. I suckered my wife there. She reminds me of that all the time. Now I have the bird and all the reptiles.
Winning.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, actually, I post videos of the macaw sometimes. She's a sweet bird, so she's awesome.
Okay.
She's about
So,
12 now.
oh, nice.
Yeah.
So you just got into your out. So you just got into monitors. So you got the Abigularis, the white throat,
Yeah.
and then you
Yep.
got Prasinus.
Yeah. So that was my foray into monitors initially. Was I started with white throats, and it was a baby at the time, or relatively young, and then I started with Prasinus. And my experience with Prasinus, I'm surprised that I've made it with tree monitors, because I got for those of you in the US that know Joe Switolski, I got the old Switolski Squitch. I didn't know shit about monitors at the time in terms of who to buy from. And I was guilty of, oh, hey, this is a good value on a captive bred pair that he had, for sale on Kingsnake at the time. So I ended up going the rounds with Joe. I got captive bred animals that came in with new scars, literally new scars, healing new scars on their neck.
Yeah.
I ended up with 2 pairs from Joe, and one male and one female died early on. So I admittedly didn't have great experiences with tree monitors right out of the gate. But the pair that survived is my pair that has produced the majority of the babies that I've bred at this point. So I can't complain that much, but it was a pretty shitty,
Can imagine.
first experience with tree monitors. So that's how I got into monitors. And then from there, I mean, like I talked about, I was kind of hooked once I got monitors. At that point, I would say, and I had already kind of started to get rid of all my green tree pythons. Again, I had pretty bad luck. One of the years I bred them, um, several of my females laid when my daughter was in the hospital when she was born, and I just didn't have a ton of good luck with them. And so I ended up just kind of not being as passionate about those. So I ended up, that's how I actually got my first pair of Helidermas too, as I traded a guy for some chondros. And so somewhere in there, I started collecting the Helidermas as well. And this was all, like I said, within the last 6 or 7 years. And from them, I've just kind of, really focused most of my collecting and collection on my monitor lizards. So I've obviously expanded. We went over the species list. Admittedly, I've expanded from a species keeping standpoint a ton over the last 6 months. The market's really dipped here, so I've done a lot more trading and stuff like that, just because the prices of animals have gone down. So I've kind of taken advantage to get some animals that I haven't had the ability to keep yet. But yeah, just circling back, just started, getting into the monitor lizards, and it started with the white throats and the Prasinus. I got a pair of blue tree monitor babies fairly early on and raised them up. I actually did get them to breed. And then unfortunately, I lost my female about a year and a half ago to egg colitis infection. So That was unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah, reproductive issues are unfortunately crop up when you're breeding animals, obviously. But that was it was super quick. I don't know if she ovulated or what, but she looked super big one day, and then the next day she was super lethargic, and I took her to the vet. She died like literally within 24 hours. So, but yeah, and then so just kept growing, focused on. I kind of started doing Ackies after that, yellow Ackies, red Ackies, had those for a couple years. And then where I really kind of, if you will, hit the home run with breeding and stuff, and kind of where I guess the the dream started to somewhat become a reality with this potentially becoming a business, was I bought a group of Kimberly rock monitors. And this was, oh shoot, it was probably 3 or 4 years ago now. And I got them right at 2 years of age. And
ready to go.
Yep, I found an ad on Fauna, and it was luck of the draw, man. I surfed Fauna all the time back then. And I reached out to this guy, and he was selling his collection, just too busy. I got a bunch of Ackies from him and stuff too. But the group of Kimberleys I got them that season. It was kind of near the end of the summer, and I got them. And within a month or two of getting them, both the females, he didn't even know the sex for sure. He told me, he's like, I'm pretty sure they're 2-2, but I'm not positive. I got them within a month of having them. Both females laid a clutch, maybe not within a month, but within 2 months of having them, both females laid a clutch of me. They were only, I think I got 2 or 3 fertile eggs in each clutch. But that was the end of the summer. It was the next year that those animals, man, they lived in a group. They were in a 6 foot by 4 foot by 2 foot cage, done up real nicely. And those things just pumped out eggs for me, man. Both those females, I probably did, I don't know, like 50 or 60 Kimberly rock monitor eggs that year. And this was right before. So since then, the market on Kimberly rock monitors has come down a lot, and it's probably just kind of corrected because more people have breeding aged animals. But back then they were selling here for $1,200 a piece.
Damn.
And they would sell immediately. I mean, I would, a clutch of 10 or 12, and you'd post them, and they'd be sold in a week. So now Kimberly rock monitors are down to like $600 or $700, which quite honestly is fine, because they're
still a nice
relatively they're a relatively easy species to breed compared to some, and they're a great species to keep. And I don't see them going down to peanuts or anything. They'll probably level out there and may even go back up a little bit. But that was really a game changer for me, and quite frankly allowed me to continue to invest in the animals that I had and continue to grow my collection. So, like I said, back then I listed all these species I had. Back then I had, a quarter of what I had now, because I had a few pairs of Ackies and the Kims. But they allowed me to, kind of continue to expand with some of the tree monitors and some of the other stuff. And it wasn't long after that. So keep in mind, all this time I'm still working full time. Okay. And my wife is also an engineer. So I should also probably explain, I have 3 kids now. My family dynamic and kind of family life is I'm married. I have an 8-year-old daughter, a 5-year-old son, and a 3-year-old daughter. Okay. So during all this time, I think my youngest probably hadn't been born yet. My wife had been kind of working part-time. She's an engineer as well. She's a civil engineer. I'm a chemical engineer. So the other thing that was an absolute blessing in how I was able to grow my business is I got a job with a water treatment company where I worked from home, and I had a customer base, and it was an extremely demanding job. I worked probably 50 hours a week on average or more, which is if you're in America. That's not insane, but it's
Mm.
still obviously a demanding job. But it was all on my own accord. Like I didn't have a boss. Like I did have a boss, but I didn't have to. I was very high performing. I did well, so I didn't have a boss breathing down my neck. So I worked from home. I went to my customer bases, but it allowed me to kind of do my animal stuff around my schedule and do, like, so that during this time I was still shipping animals and stuff like that. And this
Yeah.
flexible job that I had all kind of allowed me to do that. Now it was a lot. I was only getting, working 50 hours a week and taking care of all these animals was a
Yeah, it's
lot.
hard with the
Yeah.
kids and the wife
Yep.
and just trying to be alive as a general, go to the gym, eat,
Right.
shower, sleep. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, just living and animals and work. It was a lot. So all this time I had the Kimberleys. I was continuing to basically take most of the money I was making from the Kims and stuff and continuing to buy, like my Tristies and my Gilleni and, my Pilbaras and, doing other things and, snakes and rounding out some of my other breeding projects and stuff.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that was a huge game changer was my white throat female. I didn't even necessarily have full intentions of breeding. My white throat male when I got him was just going to be a pet. My
Yeah.
green tree monitors when I initially got them were just going to be pets. They were, that was my initial intent when I got into monitors. I decided after having my white throat and how much I loved him for like 6 months, I was like, you know what, I'm going to get a female and just see what happens. So I got a female and put them together. And then in a matter of 1 year, she laid me over 100 eggs. Over 100 eggs in 1 year. She laid 3 clutches of 33, 33, and 35.
Damn.
And so that was also a game changer. So obviously from a money, standpoint, that was a nice way to, be able to continue to reinvest in things. So this is so kind of fast forward. This during all this happening is kind of around when my youngest daughter was born. Okay. So my wife had decided that when my youngest daughter was born, she was going to take a year off of work and raise the youngest daughter because it's totally different here compared to, the States. We don't get shit for time off. I think they get like 3 or 4 weeks paid, or depending on your employer. It's not like it should be, over in the UK and stuff.
Yeah,
But
we get like 9 months, I think.
right.
Yeah.
So she decided she was going to take a year off and whatnot. So right at the end of her year off is when COVID rolled around.
Ah.
So she was getting ready to go back to work, and that's kind of when COVID rolled around. And my daughter was in kindergarten at the time, and they were doing the distance learning. And so it just really wasn't feasible for my wife to go back to work at the time. And so, long story short, we kind of decided that she wasn't going to go back to work. So she ended up being out of work for around it was a little over 2 years. And all the while, my reptile stuff was expanding. I was making good money from the reptiles. I was still working my job, my demanding job, working 50 hours a week. And I admittedly was starting to kind of burn out.
Mm.
And my wife finally said, look, you've proven that you can make some good money with the reptiles. I think I'm ready to go back to work. Do we want to like kind of look at and consider how we can maybe make this work financially in terms of me returning to work? Obviously, my wife returning to work and me taking on more of the duties with the kids at that point, because my daughter was still only 1 year old at the time, because it's been 2 years now. So long story short, we kind of made that decision and looked at the finances. We used a little bit of retirement money to invest a little bit into the reptile business, a little bit more to continue expansion and do some modifications to, where I'm at infrastructure wise and stuff.
Mm.
And yeah, basically a couple of years ago, we pulled the trigger and decided that my wife was going to go back to work. And I was going to kind of, start the high desert herps business and do this full time and take care of the kids. And so that was in the summer of 2021. So it's
Nice.
been two
2 years.
year, yeah, 2 years now. So
Yeah.
my wife works. She doesn't work full time. She works 30 hours a week, which is enough to still get like healthcare and stuff. So that's, one of the deciding factors, and one of the things that, went into our decision was obviously I had benefits before with my full-time job, and
Yeah.
we needed to have that option and ability and stuff. So yeah, that's kind of where I the gist of kind of how I ended up where I am and how I got to doing this as a business. So I like to think of it as, it's been an evolution, and it's been a lot of work. So one of the things that I'm working on now is I'm trying to basically redo all my caging for my monitors specifically. I redid a lot of my caging for my snakes in recent last year, but now I'm rebuilding all my cages. So with the schedule that I used to have, working and just kind of, realistically building the collection kind of on the fly as I have over the years, a lot of the caging I've found used, and I've gotten from like collection acquisitions and things like that I've gotten from people. So it's been kind of a hodgepodge of, oh, I've got this cage, I can fit it in this space. So one of the things I'm doing now is going through and rebuilding all my cages to better fit my space and stuff like that, and make them more functional for what I'm doing and stuff. So it's a lot of work, but it's been fun at the same time and beneficial. But yeah, it's just how things have evolved for me has been very interesting in terms of, how things are different now than they were obviously 4 years ago, or, even 10 years ago when I was a very small time collector or whatever. So
It's a hard one because, for example, right now in my incubator, I have 55 Aki eggs and 27 Gilleni eggs.
yep.
Now, obviously, the American market, I think, is quite healthy. The UK market, not so much. In the sense of Gilleni a year ago would have been £400, £500, £600. Now
Okay.
they're about 300, so they're like half the price. Akis, when I started breeding them, would go for £200, like you say, instantly, boom, £200. Now I sell mine for between £80 and £100, so half price. My female Aki laid me 27 eggs. 32 days later, she laid me 22 eggs, and then 40 days later, she laid me 22, 23 eggs.
Wow.
Yeah.
Those are some massive clutches.
I think I've got the world record, 27. I'm yet to find anyone to beat
I
it.
have never heard of that many. Is that a red
I've got it
Aki,
on
I'm
video.
assuming?
No, that's a yellow, man.
Wow,
Yeah, yeah.
unbelievable, man. That's
Yeah, she's
awesome.
yellow Aki on film, 27 eggs. World
That's
record.
awesome.
Guinness
That's
Guinness
awesome.
Book, come find me.
There you go.
But like you say, a couple of years ago, I'd have been like, "Oh my god, this is incredible! I can buy some more enclosures. I can reinvest this because I'm not a breeder. Don't get me wrong, I breed. Yeah, Sven, that's right, damn right, Sven. She's So just a quick funny story. I swapped this Aki, this said Aki, that's a monster for laying eggs. She's not even that big either. Like she's not a big. She's a good size, but she's not a big Aki.
Yep.
So I swapped her for a red Tegu, and at the time, female Akis were going for about £500. This would have been 3 or 4 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. And I swapped her for a red Tegu, so female red Tegu for a female yellow Aki. I got her, and then I was told it was a male, like from a few Aki breeders here in the UK. I was like, oh, for fuck's sake, I've swapped this Aki for this expensive high-end red Tegu. Yeah, then all of a sudden out of nowhere, and I'd never bred an animal full stop ever. I had an egg from a Chihuahua back in the day, and that was just because I kept them together, not because I was trying to breed them. So I'd never bred a reptile ever. And all of a sudden, this
Yeah.
Aki just was like, whoop. I was like, oh my god, what's wrong with her? Is she okay? And then she was skinny again, like the next day, and I was like, huh? Now I know, obviously, that's the start of vitellogenesis. But at the time,
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
what's wrong with her? And then all of a sudden, she's getting
Yeah.
bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger over the space of like 20 days, 22 days. And then, long story short, she laid 18 slug eggs.
Oh wow.
I was like, okay, so she is a girl. And I had 1.2 at the time because I brought another female because I assumed this one was a boy, and I had no interest to sell it because it's my pet. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So then I had 1.2, and I was producing maybe 200 Aki eggs a year. Mad. But yeah, so now go on.
Well, I was gonna ask. So you said a couple things that are wild to me. So remind me, pounds to US dollars. Is it about?
It's about the set. I'm pretty sure, like $1,000 would be like £800.
That's kind of what I thought. Yep.
Yeah,
That's
so
kind of what I thought. So similar
Yeah.
to what the euro used to be, kind of, right?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, the pound's gone
Okay.
down quite a bit
Okay.
lately. But yeah,
Yeah,
roughly about the same.
My brother-in-law actually used to play hockey in Germany, so I have spent a decent amount of time in Europe. We've been there 4 or 5 times over the last 10 years. So, so that's wild to me. The price of Ackies is so low. So, the markets
everyone
here.
does it. That's why everyone breeds them.
Well,
And we're a tiny island.
yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's all supply and demand, right? That's how it always works. But, it's been interesting here, like this year. So Ackies seem like they took a huge hit last year. I've got a ton of Ackies laying a ton of eggs right now, but it seems like I've had really good luck selling Ackies this year. So right now I'm selling Ackies for 400 American, obviously.
But
so
yellows
that's
are reds.
Reds. So I'll sell yellows for a little cheaper, usually 350 or sometimes even 300. But the interesting thing is last year I found that near the end of the season, so, December, whatever, by the time eggs are hatching and stuff, the market was pretty shitty. And I was selling, a lot of Ackies for down. I think I had them posted at like $300 or 350, but it seems like it's rebounded a little bit here.
This is an Aki I've produced. This is the
nice.
stuff I sell for £80.
Nice. That's nice animal.
For £80, man.
All you fetch, huh? Yeah. So, but yeah, that's interesting. What I was going to say is the price for Ackies. So the interesting thing is, so I look at the market peak as being a couple of years ago when I was selling my Kimberleys and stuff for like 1,200 and stuff. What I was talking about, I remember I wasn't producing Tristies back then, but I remember seeing them for 1,000 and Ackies for 1,200 and tree monitors were actually around the same as they are now, then maybe a little bit more. They really ballooned around that time. But it seems like what I was going to say is a lot of the higher dollar animals, like especially the Kims and the Tristies, have come down a lot. Like Kim's now $600, sometimes 700, Tristies 500, 600. So they're at like 50% of what they were 2 years ago. Whereas Ackies, I've only ever sold for 450. Even 2 years ago during the peak is what I posted Ackies at, and they sold at 450. And now I've got them posted at 400, and they've been selling really good this year. I haven't had to wholesale any Ackies yet, and I've probably sold 4 clutches. So probably 30 or 40. They're the one monitor that seems when I go to shows, I never did shows until January was my first ever show. And I go to shows and I don't sell much. This last show I sold tree monitor for $1,800, which was awesome. I've taken tree monitors and I've never really sold any at shows before, but I actually sold one this time, which was great. But the Ackies are something that seem to sell at shows, and they sell really well here. So I guess to your point, it must just be population and how much more people and pet keepers out there are in the US, because I do think that Ackies are one species that, when you start dealing with ball pythons and even crested geckos, and I breed crested geckos, obviously, you know, you're just generally sellers selling to other breeders, right? And a big, and that's
pyramid
probably
scheme,
true with a lot of the higher end monitors, but I feel like Ackies and even Prasinus and some of these cooler animals are selling to a lot of
pets.
pet
The
keepers,
pets.
you know,
I agree.
which is awesome. To, you know, to give these people pets and stuff. So yeah, yeah, that's interesting to me. I didn't realize that the market for Ackies and stuff like that was so low there.
Yeah, it's crashed. So what I think is a combination of things. So there's, I think Baum mentioned it. There's you get a cycle. People breed Ackies, they get good money, so
Yeah.
everyone jumps on the bandwagon,
Yeah.
oversaturates the market. Then
Yep.
all of a sudden
Yep.
there's too much supply, no demand. So then people sell their adults, and then 2 or 3 years pass, and then all of a sudden everyone wants Ackies again, and only the people
Yep.
like me that have kept them because I'm keeping them because I want to keep them, not because I'm chasing
Right.
the money, I
Right.
can then capitalize. Energy prices over here because of a multitude of different things, but mainly the war with Ukraine and Russia and the whole oil and Brexit, and there's been a whole thing, and then obviously the payback from, I think they were called stimulus in America, but like basically you get given money
Yeah.
from the government through COVID.
Yep. Yep.
So there's a conspiracy. So allegedly the government are skimming off the top of stuff to claim that money back in bits and bobs. So that we're impending into a recession, whether we want to admit it or not, but we are. So
Right.
electricity's gone up, the cost of living's gone up, everything's gone up. So reptiles, when everyone was at home and had loads of spare money, shot up in price.
Yep.
And now they're starting to dwindle down. I've never struggled to sell Ackies. I don't know if that's just because I'm quite big on social, so people message me and then I get like a bit of a list, and I do wholesale to a few shops if I produce high numbers. For example, I've got like 50, 60 Ackie eggs in the incubator. Whether I'm going to hatch them all yet, I don't know. Because it's an interesting question for you, because the landscape's different, but as a breeder, is it ethical for me to hatch 60 Ackies if I can't guarantee homes?
Do you want me to answer that question?
You can answer it if you like.
I mean, it's hard because I do agree that's a question that needs to be answered. And I guess the short answer is if you really can't find them homes, then I would say no, you probably shouldn't be breeding them, right? I mean, but I also find it hard to believe a little bit, and maybe this is just me being naive and ignorant and whatnot, but it just seems like there's enough of a demand out there that I find it hard to believe that people are not ever going to want them. And I guess maybe that brings up another debate is it good to produce so much that it drives the value down to the point that people that maybe shouldn't have these animals are buying them because they're $50 each rather than the 400 that they used to be. You know what I mean? So
I know, yeah.
that's I mean, that's a good debate. That's a tough one, right?
My biggest concern, right? So I've just shown you the Ackie. I'll bring it back up again for everybody interesting. So this is the sort of stuff I produce. That's a 4-month-old yellow Ackie that I've produced. Yep. Right? Very nice animal, if I say so myself.
Yep.
Now, some Ackies are completely brown, drab, washed, and people are breeding them, and I have to compete with those prices. Now, in my opinion, that's a higher end animal, what I've just produced. So it should demand a higher end price. But unless you're someone like myself or yourself, where you want the best because we're trying to breed it, if you just want an Ackie for a pet, for the most part, you don't really care what it looks like. Just generally speaking, you care what it costs. And that's the reality of selling to Joe Blogg's public. So if my Ackies are 150, argument's sake, and the guy down the road is breeding ugly Ackies, but for £75, people are going to not even look at mine. They're not going to entertain it outside of my followers and stuff who know that I'm ethical and I'm breeding in big enclosures and I give UVB and all this other stuff. But for the most part, just someone searching on the faunas, or over here it's called pre-loved, which is like your Craigslist. People aren't going to look at my Ackies because they're too expensive. So you've got to sort of contend with that. I can't get my female to stop, so sometimes I'll just feed the eggs to my monitors. I I have no issue just feeding off eggs. I don't. It doesn't bother me. I'm not doing for me. I don't do it for money. I'd like to get into this because I've contemplated it a lot of times, but we'll get into that in a sec. But for me, if I don't hatch any Ackies, I don't hatch any Ackies. But for example, that one I just shared is a lady that I sold to, and she's wanted an Ackie for a very, very long time, and I've been able to give her an incredible quality animal for a really good price, and she fucking adores it. She loves it. So that to me is why I do it. But for the most part, I don't need to. And I'll be completely honest because I'm not one to lie. When I got 27 eggs from Gilleni, I got 30 eggs and 27 looked good. And again, I'm hoping for another clutch from my other female, so potentially more. My brain instantly went, "Oh fucking hell, yeah, I can get some black trees. Like if I sell them, I can invest in some black trees." I'll be honest.
Sure.
Like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and I've got a pair of Glauidii Kimberleys, and I've sold them. They're going next month, and the money from those are going on a bigger enclosure for my tree monitors. And then no one I have needs an upgrade for at least a little bit. So the money from the Gilleni is spare. I don't need it for me because I work a full-time job. So let's get some dream animals. I'll still be able to afford them with the Gilleni if they sell. But 2 years ago, I had a nice big chunk of change in the incubator, and now it's half. And I guess my point and my question I'm trying to make is with the volatile landscape that is the reptile market, do you ever like get scared that all of a sudden you're like, fuck, like these animals aren't going to sell and how am I going to pay my bills? Because you're relying on the animals in a way, or do you just think you'll find a way sort of thing?
Oh man. Yeah, that's a great question. So I have that worry is a constant. So my stress level now compared to where it was 3 years ago, for example, when I was working a 50-hour-a-week job and had all the reptiles, is just a completely different stress, right? So back then it was, how am I going to get through this day and get all the shit done that I need to get done and still have a few minutes to, interact with my family and kids. Now the concern and stress has shifted to, okay, how can I make sure my job performance, which is breeding reptiles, is good enough that I'm still providing a good, living for my, wife and kids, right? So to answer that question, the concern of like not being able to make enough money and whatnot, and is the market going to crash with these animals and stuff like that? I mean, yeah, that's a natural. I would be completely lying if I told you that didn't cross my mind.
Yeah.
One of the things that I will say is that so stepping away from a very high, my job paid pretty well that I had before, and like just stepping away from a job like that, I mean, it takes, I mean, it's nerve-wracking. When I initially, the first year that I was breeding reptiles, I had in my mind, like, okay, my biggest constraint is going to be making money and like getting things to breed and like selling things. And like, I've got to expand because I've got to have enough animals to make enough money to, provide the living that I want, for my family and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
And obviously there's a little more like that went into it, like in terms of actually knowing numbers and like, okay, if we maintain our style of life, how much money does the business need to make and stuff like that. So with all that being said, even with the market tank, I guess I have one of the things that I'm happy about and that I've come to realize maybe over the last year is I have done well enough and I have now a broad enough collection, especially with like the snakes that I do and the things like that, that I am not dependent or reliant on any specific animal or even any group of animals.
Yeah.
So for example, I I have not gotten any eggs out of those white throat monitors for a year. And you know what? Like if you think about like my revenue and stuff, well, yeah, even if I got one clutch of 30 eggs out of her this year, that's a good chunk of money. But I guess I don't need that, and I guess rely on that. So I've got enough irons in the fire, if you will, that I'm confident and fairly comfortable that I don't need to push my animals. I can give them breaks. I can give them years off. Um, the other thing is I have a wife that makes a good living too, right? She's an engineer too. So I'm not the sole and only breadwinner for my family. So months have their ups and downs.
Yeah.
But you know, there hasn't been a big enough dip in the market. You know, like I said, I was wholesaling things for a while there at 50, even Ackies I wholesaled last year for $150 a piece. And you know, sometimes it's like, you know, it's a little scary when you're doing that, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's again, it's always a concern when you do it as a business, but um you know, it's just kind of the way it is when you breed animals, I guess.
Yeah,
You
it's the
know?
reality of it. So
Yeah, yeah.
the next question that's popped into my brain then from that is, how do you choose the irons that are in the fire, and how do you I won't put words in your mouth actually, so I've got a couple of like ideas in my head, but how do you choose the species that you wish to make projects in a way, like to add to high desert herb? How did you pick the species that you've got?
So I'm thinking a little bit about where to go with this question first. So admittedly, another thing, when I left my job initially, my old life real job, when I retired, if you will, I the plan was initially to build a big shop on our property, or even do an addition to our house to give myself a bunch more space. And the reason for that initially was, again, going through in my head at the time, this again 2 years ago. Now granted, I have expanded, like my animal collection is at least double what it was then, probably now, like I've continued to expand. But in my mind then, going full-time, transitioning from this job, my mind was, I'm going to have all these animals, because I mean, I'm doing this all the time. You know, I'm going to have all this time. I'm going to have all these animals, because that's, you know, what I need to do. That's my job now. Right.
Yeah.
So the initial plan was to build a big old shop in my backyard, like big, and have all the animals there. Or we were even going to consider an addition to our house. Up until that point, what I had been doing is I have 2 insulated, climate controlled sheds in my backyard with power and everything, a 10 by 12 and an 8 by 10, which is where I keep my helidermas and my snakes now. And I had my monitors. I actually had a wall built down the middle of my garage. So one half of my garage was climate controlled. I got a mini split in there. One half of my garage was completely climate controlled, and that's where I was keeping my monitors at the time. And it's a big garage. It's a big space. So initially the plan was to, again, build a big shop and whatnot. Well, I started expanding with the animals and stuff. And one of the things that I kind of figured out in the first 6 months, this was also the time that the cost of building materials was absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we decided was, we're just going to wait. We're going to wait to do any expansion. And we're going to see if the cost of building materials comes down and stuff like that. So we waited. And the thing that I figured out pretty quick is that it wasn't going to be, space was not going to be my biggest constraint. That was going to be a constraint, but it was actually my time, because I was now taking care of kids, 3 days a week while my wife was at work. She works 10 hours a day, 10 hours a day, 3 days a week. So those are full days with the kids. And remember, at the time, I still had a 1.5-year-old when all this started. She's older now, obviously, but so I found out pretty quickly that that time was probably my biggest constraint, and it wasn't going to be, oh, bring in all these animals, because I just wasn't going to have time to take care of all these animals. So things have changed a little bit since then. With being that I found out time was the biggest constraint, we basically decided that we weren't going to expand from a footprint standpoint. So I took over the second half of the garage. We rented storage and did some shifting around in our house. So I basically use my entire garage now, which again is temperature and climate controlled. And I've got, like all my incubators in there and my freezer and stuff like that. And so I've got those 3 spaces, if you will, for all my animals. So this is, again, kind of transcribed over the last year and a half. And I've basically am now just getting to the point where I've kind of collected the animals really that I've wanted, and quite frankly, as opportunities have kind of presented themselves to kind of fill the space that I have, so to speak. So for the most part, everything that I kind of initially got is just driven by desire and want. Like, okay, that sounds like a cool species, I'd like to keep that. And then I kind of figure out, okay, do I have room, and do I have space, to bring that type of animal on? And the answer for the most part, until relatively recently, has been, yeah, if there's something out there that I've wanted, I could have planned for it and can make space. That is changing, like literally over the last month or two. I just finished a big sketch out of exactly what cage is going to go where, and I'm kind of getting to the point where I'm now kind of at capacity. So again, a really long-winded way of saying, up until this point, it's just kind of been, I've picked animals that I thought were cool as opportunities have presented itself. So like, for example, over the last 6 months, I've done a lot of trades with people, like the Primordius, things like that. So if people reach out with an animal that I think it's cool, again, I kind of, okay, do I have the space for it? And then I'll just kind of pull the trigger and go for it. The Spencers that I got were a significant shift in philosophy, a little bit, if you will, and a game changer in the sense that they're still young. So my male is relatively large, but my females are small. So right now they're still in relatively small cages, but obviously I understand and realize that they're going to need significantly bigger cages than what I'm used to keeping, with the exception of my white throats, right? So there was absolutely a business decision and discussion, with my wife and stuff about, hey, like, for one, it was an investment to buy them, because they're not cheap, even with the dip in the market, and I knew the guy that was selling them. He was actually local to me. But long story short, there was a lot that went in that decision, and I realized that it is going to mean like parting with a few pairs of Ackies that are breeding for me now, once they're, adults and are going to need to go into their large cages, because I'm going to have to part with some of my smaller cages to fit into the space that I currently have, to fit those lizards. So obviously, when I look at doing something like that, I have to weigh that from both a want and a financial standpoint. So something like a Spencer's monitor and keeping those guys, I can't, and I would caution anybody that's considering trying to do this professionally or anything against, counting your eggs before they hatch, so to speak. So like when I weigh the business of keeping those Spencers, I don't plan on any return from those Spencers because let's face it, the amount of people that have successfully bred those in captivity in the United States is almost zero. I know obviously they breed out in Australia, and I'm not honestly super familiar with, if or how many breeders have them over in Europe, but
not many.
So yeah, I just, I gotta weigh that that space versus whether those will, return me any money. But one of the nice things about doing this professionally is I can also spend money on animals that most people can't because I have some fluid income that is part of this business, and so if I spend the money on the Spencers and I take up all the space with the Spencers, I can't look at that and go, they have to return me X amount of dollars a year because you can't bank on that with animals,
No, of
right?
course. Yeah.
But they have the potential to, right? So I've got to weigh all that with, okay, how many Ackie cages can I have? And I've been breeding Ackies for 3 or 4 years now that I can pretty consistently say that I'm going to get X amount of Ackie eggs and X amount of dry mark-on eggs and stuff like that. So yeah, it's just it's all a balance at this point between space and I try and let passion drive me as much as I can, right? I can't just keep a bunch of outrageously expensive pets that aren't going to return me any money because I do rely on this as part of an income. But like, for example, right now, my lace monitor, I only have one. I don't have a pair. Will I breed them? Will I breed her? I don't know. I don't feel like unless I build an enclosure for her in my house somewhere or something, I don't know that I'm going to have a big enough enclosure that I want to have a pair for example. So yeah, it's just all weighing things out. But I try and keep things as much as I can that I enjoy because they also return the best because they take up, if you're passionate about it, you're going to spend more time and stuff on them, right?
Yeah,
So,
you can't lose. If you're passionate about it, like I say, when the market dips, when things don't sell, you're still outside of, obviously, like you say, for you, it's a little bit different because obviously you're relying on them for income. But in the regards to the Spencers, it's high risk, high reward. But then it's like you say, if you're just getting species because, for example, it's the next new trend, when they're no longer a trend, you fall out of love with them. And all of a sudden, that's a bad business decision because, yeah, they've made you money for 6 months, but now you're feeding and running these animals that you don't particularly care as much about. Basically, what I'm understanding from listening to you is that you just need to find an incredible wife, is what I'm understanding.
That's a hell of a start. Yes, that is a hell of a start. That makes it a lot easier. So
to be fair,
yeah, no, she's great. She helps at all the reptile shows and stuff too, which is always fun. So
Fee, bless her. Before we lived here, so I've got a conservatory, like a sunroom, a massive one.
Yeah.
Where my lizards are in now. And before we lived here, we were in a 1-bed apartment, and it was floor to ceiling monitor cages.
Yep.
And every single room so the kitchen, the bedroom, the lounge, every room was floor to ceiling monitor cages. Escapee bugs, all that other shit. Yeah, she dealt with it, and we moved here, and she's basically said she doesn't want any reptiles in the lounge, which is fair enough. Our lounge is tiny, but I can do the massive room in the house. I can do what I like. And yeah, she's getting good at spotting monitors that lay. So my Indicus, my mangrove monitor, she's like, oh, I think Mango's laid, and they're subtle to tell you. They're tiny.
Really?
Yeah, tiny dip in the tail. That's it. And she's like, oh, I think Mango's laid, and she's right. She picked out the Gilleni I had laid the other day. She's like, oh, that Gilleni is looking really skinny. And I was like, yeah, fucking sure enough, it's laid. back when I had Timorensis. She found the eggs for the Timorensis, so yeah, she's not a lizard person at all, but she's getting good. she's getting
she's got the keen eye.
yeah, she's
That's awesome.
definitely. And then yeah, so it sounds like you just need a very supportive spouse, and all your dreams can come true.
It certainly helps. It certainly helps. I mean, like I said, I went through my years of, oh man, my PayPal balance doesn't quite have enough, to cover
Yeah,
this animal. She's gonna see this $400 out of the, $2,000 transaction. She's gonna start asking questions. So I've
yeah.
been there. I've been the ask wife for permission and stuff. So I know how it goes. But yeah, my wife is amazing. So
So then, next question on that then. So obviously you're passion driven. You're trying to find stuff that is going to give you a return on investment for the most part because you are making this for a business.
yeah,
Where my brain is going now is that space question we touched on a little bit off air, but now because obviously we were just speaking on space, and you're saying now you're redesigning a room. So
yeah,
just as a quick background on myself, I mainly keep mangrove monitors. I've kept a whole plethora of monitors, but I mainly keep mangrove monitors, and I am at capacity once everything's an adult. I have space now, but I know I
yeah,
need some big cages in 2-3 years time.
yeah,
So long story short, if I allow myself to get a black tree monitor, a mangrove monitor has to go.
yep,
I just can't house both. Now, I can house both, but I really struggle with animals in small enclosures. I worked it out. In my room, I can keep 60 4x2x2 enclosures. If I wanted to say keep a pair of Ackies in a 4x2x2, I could have 60 pairs of Ackies in my room and not be stupidly high. That's only like
yeah,
4 of them stacked. So it's a
yep,
big room. But for the most part, I'm
yeah.
just going to have 6 mangrove enclosures in there, and that's going to be that. One, I don't know how big your enclosures are, and I'm not asking you to get into it, but do you sometimes feel bad, or do you think you're happy with how you keep them? And two, how do you manage the space and who gets what sort of thing? Because like you say, the Spencers are going to need a big one, Lacey's going to need a big one. So how do you sort of switch that up?
So I mean, this is a loaded question, obviously, and I think you obviously know that.
I'm not asking you to say
And it,
how big or small,
and
because
it's
I know it's a debate and I'm not interested in that. I'm just interested
well,
in the philosophy of a breeder.
well, and here's the thing, and that's to your point. To your point, so people ask me all the time, right? And let's take tree monitors for example. What minimum size would you keep a tree monitor in? And my response is the minimum size I would keep a tree monitor in is a 4x4x2. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't like that size of cage for an adult, but I think you can set up a cage appropriately. And I know some breeders do, where you could house a single animal in a 4x4x2. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now the question is, do I think a tree monitor would enjoy and do better in an 8x4x2 or something like that? And my response is yes, I do for the most part. Now, I think there are some animals that at least at certain stages of their life actually do better in small cages, like legitimately, like I believe that. But here's the thing, from a small cage versus large cage standpoint. If you're a keeper that is going to have 1 or 2 pairs of animals and you have the ability to keep them in a gigantically large cage, and they're not a species that will not enjoy that for whatever reason, then I think that by all means everybody should keep in as large as you can. The fact of the matter is, there are people like me that do this for a living. There are breeders that are constrained by space, and to your point, you are in some facet
Yep.
as well.
Yep.
And so my cages are not I am probably not going to have, if I want to have 10 pairs of tree monitors, I'm probably not going to have them in 8x4x2 cages, right? Just because that takes up double the amount of space that a 4x4x2 cage does.
Yep.
Now, with all that being said, that by no means gives any breeders the excuse to give shitty care to their animals or put them in cages that you can't adequately care for an animal in. So, for example, you can't put an adult tree monitor in an Exoterra, any of them. It doesn't matter. A 3 foot by 3 foot by 2 foot, whatever. The biggest Exoterra that's out there, you can't have an adult tree monitor in Exoterra. And I'm never going to say that you can and that's okay, because it's not. A breeder, it doesn't matter. But I think that there needs to be people that do what I do too, that are breeders that are not going to necessarily have massive sized cages. So, for example, pairs of Ackies, I keep my pairs in 4x2x2s. Okay. I don't feel bad about that at all. I do their cages up really nice. I've got a nice fake background that they can climb, a nice ledge. I use low wattage bulbs so that their bulb can be relatively close to the basking area. They can't get in contact with it, but I can stack their cages so that a 4x2x2, I have a lot more climbing and surface area than I see a lot of people that set up 6x2x2s, for a pair of Ackies, for example. So again, just getting back to there is absolutely a fine line as a breeder between efficiency, between you got to have the numbers to produce and make money, but you can't cut corners and keep animals in shitty small ass cages, because they're also not going to produce for you, right?
No,
so
100%.
I also believe that if generally, if an animal is producing and breeding for you, you're doing most things right. So yeah, I guess that's kind of my take on caging and cages. I don't want to put things in I don't ever want to put something in something where I'm like, oh, this is too small for this animal. And sometimes you have to temporarily for, if you have to.
Yeah. I've got a tree monitor right now in too small of an enclosure because it's come back to me and it's going to a new home in September, and I don't have a big enough enclosure for it to house it long term. It's currently in way too small of an enclosure. It's going to be in there for 2 months. It's big enough to functional enough for it to be able to bask and have a firmer gradient. But I'm not going to go out and buy a 6x4x2 for 2 months. I'm just not going to. I'm not going to do it. If it was staying with me for a long term, it's different. But it's literally staying with me for 2 months and it's going again. Just on the space debate, like there's a lot of drama on the Tree Monitor Facebook pages. I'm not involved with it, and I'll be completely 100% real with you right now. I wholeheartedly believe that breeders have to sacrifice space to be able to do what they do. Now, the question is that correct? Is that not correct? Where I stand on that is I think it sits with the breeder. That's my personal opinion of it. I don't get too involved with that sort of stuff because all of a sudden then the whole hobby becomes this visceral vortex of he said this and she said that. So I'm not interested in that.
Yeah.
My personal collection and my personal brain, I don't like animals in smaller enclosures. So my mangrove monitor, Mango, my baby, my lizard who I love more than my child, she started off in I'll be completely honest, I got her 3 years ago, and saw her on, let's call it Craigslist. It was pre-loved. Mangrove monitor for sale, £300. I was like, oh my God, wow. Oh my God. Like, oh yeah. Google, what size enclosure does a mangrove monitor need? 6x2x2, 6x2x2, 6x2x2. And then you get the odd enclosure that's like 10x10x8. And I'm like, nah, fuck them. So 6x2x2 it is.
Yeah.
I went to pick this lizard up. I had an empty 6x2x2 at home. Got this lizard, and this fucking lizard, she's not massive. She's 28 inches total length. Length. She's not big. I put her in the 6x2x2 and I was like, oh, fuck, this is tiny.
Yep.
So I ordered a 6x3x3 because that's the biggest I could house in my
Yep.
1-bed flat. Shouldn't have been
Yep.
getting a mangrove monitor in the first place. So I can't criticize people because I've been there, right?
Yep.
Still am now in some people's eyes. Anyway, so she goes in the 6x3x3. She's in there for a year, starts laying me eggs regularly every 90 days, eggs. So arguably, she's happy, right? She has
Sure.
all the correct environmental premises to
Yep.
produce natural cycle of eggs.
Yep.
When I moved here, I put her in an 8x3x3. Was a lot better and continued to cycle. So still, I was able to meet her natural needs to be able to give her to get eggs. And now she's in a 6 long, 4 deep, 6 tall, which is a big enclosure, and
Yep.
she looks tiny in there, which is
Yep.
lovely.
Yep.
She hasn't been in there enough to see if she'll cycle yet. If she doesn't cycle, people will say, well, she was happier in the 8x3x3. No, I just can't provide ample care. It's a reflection of me as a keeper in the 6x4x6. But the point I'm trying to make is I have 6 mangrove monitors. Now, I can't house the other mangrove monitor in, let's just say, a 6x4x4, because one of them's in a 6x4x6. My brain won't let me. So I have to have them all in 6x4x6s, right?
Okay.
That's just me. That's not a disregard to anybody else. Like, my brain
Yep.
is fucked up. So that's me.
Yep. Yep.
I don't have the space to do that. So I've got to put them in. For example, my plan is to build a 10x4x4 and stack it. So I have 2 10x4x4s and have dividers. So it's a 5x4x4, 4 5x4x4s, but house pairs together because I'm raising
Yep.
pairs together. So that's the plan.
Yep.
Some people will go, that's a massive enclosure. I'll be honest, because it's not tall, my head's saying it's too small. Now, my personal moral dilemma is like, right, okay, this is too small for me. So now I'm like, do I just sell some mangroves so I can house, for example, 4 in 6x4x6s rather than
Yep.
6 in 10x4x4 or 5x4x4 when the female lays. So that's the only reason I asked the question. I'm not here to try and catch people out. I don't give a shit for that sort of stuff.
Well, and I mean, it's the dilemma of anybody that has kept or wants to keep more and doesn't have unlimited space, and so
there's always a line.
yeah,
and everyone's lines are different. So I don't judge people for having a different line, a different line to myself. And I also don't want to come across as an elitist keeper because I think just because I have a big enclosure for one mangrove, she started off in a 6x2x2. I'm not better than fucking anybody. You know what I mean? So I'm not on either side of the fence. I just
well, and
go on.
one thing that I've always said, and one of the things that is most frustrating about the reptile hobby to me, and one of the reasons I avoid Facebook and stuff, is there's so many people that think there's only one way to do something. So to that point, and getting back on the Ackies and tree monitors and whatnot, setting up for, so we'll just talk Ackie, setting up a 6x2x2 versus a 4x2x2 for a pair. So obviously, you get 50% more space in a 6x2x2, but to that point, I think that it does get back to what, and you kind of made this point, what you're okay with as a keeper. I mean, if you feel like an Ackie needs 6x2x2 and you want it to be able to run around and stuff like that, then, I mean, if that's what you're comfortable with and you're a keeper, then again, that's the way you should keep them. Right. So, and if you're not relying on a ton of space, or you don't need to make, add profit into this, like that's kind of the unique thing that I have that other people don't need to consider, obviously.
Yeah.
But for that matter, in all honesty, when we're talking keeping animals and space and stuff, profit doesn't really matter anyway. I have to think about that if I want to keep Spencer's monitors, for example. I have to keep in mind that, okay, it's going to cost me 8 Ackie cages in the same area that I'm going to keep a Spencer's monitor, right?
Yeah.
In my mind, I have to know that, but I also at the same time, I can't go, well, I can cut 2 feet off the Spencer's cage and just, because you need to provide your animals with what they need. Right. So, yeah, again, there's more than one way to do things. And that is one of the most frustrating things about reptile keepers is there's way too many people that get way too close-minded about how to do stuff. But to that being said, you can't skimp on space, there's a limit. Absolutely. So
yeah, it's an incredibly hard one because there are a couple of people that almost forget the humble beginnings they may or may not have come from. For example, let's just use me as an example. If all of a sudden my mantra was now like the minimum for a mangrove and you should only keep mangroves in 6x4x6s. Well, hang on a minute, you dickhead. 3 years ago, you kept it in a 6x2x2. Like,
absolutely.
So people can't forget I've just leveled up in my personal keeping. It doesn't mean I'm better or worse than anybody else. And again, like I say, I had this conversation with somebody who is in the chat, and then you've just said about setting your Aki enclosures up. It's also how you set up the enclosure, and if you can give an enclosure with a lot of 3-dimensional space, for example, let's just say a Prasinus in a 4x2x4. Let's just say if the walls aren't climbable and you've got 2 sticks in there, that's a terrible enclosure.
Absolutely.
But then if you have a 6x6x2 and the walls aren't climbable and there's only 2 sticks in there, that's a terrible enclosure.
For sure.
So you have to make sure that you're making the walls climbable. You make sure that there's complexity of levels of cork bark and branches and cork tubes. And if you can do stuff like that, then, for example, a 4x2x4 fully decked out has more usable area than an empty 6x4x2. So it's about what you do with the space as well.
Absolutely. 100%. And another thing I'll say about space too, and this one's a little tough, but I do feel this way for babies and even a couple of the Shire species. I'm not convinced that some animals like bigger enclosures all the time. I have a pair of Offenburgies that I have played with different cage sizes, and one of the reasons is because I've got them to breed, but I haven't had a ton of breeding success with this specific pair. And the bigger I go on cages, the less I see them, which is common for animals. But with this pair, it is to the point that if I get them in anything bigger than a 6x2, they will literally never come out. I will never see them whatsoever. Whereas, and then what I've got them in now is a 6x2, but I've also I've had them in 4x2s before, and that's when I see them the most. They're out and about, they'll bask, and I'll come into the room and they'll stay basking. Whereas when you stick them in a 6x2, they literally, or not a 6x2, I had them in a 6x3x3, and they just hid all the time. And I've had these things for 2 years now too. It's not a matter of, I mean, it's definitely the cage. And anytime you change cages with a monitor, it takes a while for them to reacclimate and stuff. But I'll leave them in there for 6 months and I'll never see them. And then I'll move them to something a little bit smaller. And it's like, wow, nice to see you guys again. And I don't know, that could be seasonality too. It could be other stuff, but I will say, so the Offenburgies I've seen that with. The other thing is baby monitors. So often tree monitors are the number one. This happens so much. I get people that reach out to me and message me, hey, saw your videos with the tree monitors. I really want one. Will you have any in a month? I need to get a cage set up. And it's like, yeah, sure. I'm sure I will, but let's talk about cage setup. And it's like, oh, well, I'm building this 6x4x2. And I'm like, well, you know that a baby Prasinus is, about yay big, right? Like you cannot throw that thing into a 6x4x2. You will never see that poor little guy. So I know, like, I think you've probably had Cody on and stuff. And I know he raises babies in cages a little bit bigger than the ones I do. But I like, I like to be able to socialize and interact with those things when they're little. And if you get them in stuff that's too big, they just hide all the time. So, Yeah, the age old debate about size and stuff like that, enclosure size, it's a good one. It's never going to go away.
No.
It's I think that it's just one of those debates that's never going to go away. One of the things that I love about monitors, and I feel like I've probably one of the reasons I've had more success with monitors than other animals, breeding wise in the past, is I like to play with things. I like to mess with things. And I find that, I mean, cages, snakes, especially like there's not a lot to breeding snakes. I mean, everybody's done it for a long time for one thing. And I mean, they lay one clutch of eggs a year and they generally don't bury them. And I mean, there's just not as much that goes into it. Whereas one of the things that I've loved about the monitors is just playing with different
Mm.
egg box settings and temperature settings in their cages. And like, I just love messing with stuff. And again, I'm in my animal rooms all day. So I have the ability to watch my animals. And if there's something that I don't think they like in terms of lay boxes and egg nesting and things like that, even cage dimensions and cage sizes, I'm in the process of changing all my Prasinus cages because um, I don't feel like I have 6 foot tall cages, and I just don't feel like the bottom 2 feet are used whatsoever. So, I like to be able to tweak with and mess with stuff, to get animals to lay and stuff like that. And that's one things that I love about monitors. So,
On because someone's just asking what size do you enclosures do you raise your baby tree monitors. So September last year I got a captive bred from my good friend Matt, Prasinus, and she was 6 weeks old when I got her, so she'll be a year old next month. And she was 6 weeks old when I got her, and like you say, tiny little thing. And I put her in a 4 foot tall, 3 foot wide, 2 foot deep enclosure, so a big enclosure.
yeah, I'll
Yeah,
say.
massive. Now I don't know if you've seen the videos, but that lizard will launch herself onto me. She's quite social.
Okay, cool.
Don't get me wrong, she's also very flighty in her own right. She's not like for example, Reptiliartus's Sabsi. Like if I put my hand in the enclosure, she's like, "What the fuck? Who are you? Like back up." But if I have food,
Yeah,
she's all
yeah.
mine, putty in my hands. Now, everyone that watches me knows that I'm a massive advocate for big enclosures. But if and when I get a Beckerai, I will put it in something smaller.
Yes.
Um,
I
the tree monitor, the green tree, for me, I think I was lucky because she wasn't shy and she would come out. But there were times where I didn't see her for a week or two. But I personally am as a keeper, am all right with that. But some people aren't, and I know some people are. Oh my god, rip their cage apart like I did with my Gilleni one time. But I also want to socialize the Beckerai. Well, I wasn't too worried about socializing the Prasinus. I feel like if you want to socialize, giving them a crammed but smaller enclosure can work. So if someone's buying a Prasinus from you, what size enclosure do you recommend for a baby?
So I tell people if they're getting one of my 1 month old babies, which generally they are, I tell people a 2x2x2 is an awesome place to start. Generally, when we talk baby cages, we talk exoterras. So
Mm-hmm.
I would, if you're building something where the light's going to sit inside, I would go more height because, it
You lose
makes
a
it,
lot of depth with the
more,
with the
yeah,
lambs
you
in
lose
there.
a lot
Yeah.
of your height and it makes thermal gradients a little more challenging too. If you've got a hot light sitting inside a small cage, but usually people are getting the exoterras and stuff, which I find work pretty dang well for Prasinus. Occasionally I'll get some that like to glass surf. So, sometimes you'll have to do something about that. There's like rubber stuff you can spray paint on the outside of them. But most of mine don't. But yeah, 2x2x2 is awesome for like the first, until they're 3 or 4 months old. I also tell people it depends how many cages, how important socialization is
Yeah.
and how many cages you want to have to buy and move them into as they get older, right? So I find socializing Prasinus, I've actually changed some things that I'm doing and it seems to have made a big difference.
I've
But
seen
I
your video
find,
on this.
yeah, so I'm finding socialization is important, really important when they're really young, and especially first interactions and right out of the egg and stuff like that. But um, I mean, yeah, I 2x2x2 is great, and if you can keep something in there for a couple months and then have the ability to move up to, like, to your point, a 4x2x2 or a 4x2x3 or something like that until like 8 or 9 months before they go into their big adult cage. I mean, that would be a perfect progression in my mind. Some people don't want to have to do 3 cages, and so I say, okay, well, go with a 3x2x2
Mm.
and keep it in there until 6 or 7 months, and then you can go right into your adult cage after that. So again, it kind of depends on, people's situations, right, and what they are able to do and want to do and how much they want to be able to socialize and stuff like that. So
Yeah, I think socialization is the key point. For example, if you like, I wanted a social Prasinus, but I wasn't fussed. I knew I could do it
yeah,
when she was older.
yep,
Like,
yep, yep,
if and well, no, we won't say if, when I eventually hatch the UK's first captive bred mangrove monitor, I need a male first, but
yep,
when the day comes, best believe that from out of the egg, that thing's getting messed with.
yep,
I don't think it's a great idea. I think it's a terrible idea to do it with wild caught, but with a captive bred. I'm not a fan of force handling, but
yep,
interacting with something daily out of the egg, I can get on board with. Um,
yep,
I have a 8x3x3 here, and I have a pair of mangroves in there that are roughly 2 foot long. They're only juveniles. They need to bulk out a lot, but they're long and skinny. Never, ever, 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 ever see them. Ever. Like, ever.
really,
Yeah, they live underground. They're like moles.
yep,
I come home, there's dirty water, poo, and the food's gone. So at least one of them is alive, but never see them. Now, a few people have said to me, put them in a smaller enclosure, but for me, I don't care to socialize them.
yep,
And they're 7 months out of the wild. So for me, I just leave them to it. And I'm not, it's a different ball game, it's a completely different kettle of fish. So I don't care. Like, I could cut that cage in half and potentially see them more, but for me, they'll get bolder as they get older, and I'll just play with them then. But if they were a captive bred one, I think for me it'd be completely different. And I think that's another thing people forget is how much easier a captive bred animal is in comparison to a
for
wild
sure,
caught. Yeah.
yep, yeah. Well, and that's funny you say, like, a couple things in there, like, most people, which is 100% understandable, don't like the idea, especially people that are going to spend $2,000 on a tree monitor. They're going to get really nervous if they get an animal and don't see it for a week or 2 weeks or something
Mm.
like that. And even I remember when I was getting into monitors and these Offenbergies that I have, it can be alarming to not see an animal for 2 weeks at a time,
Mm.
and that's literally how it goes sometimes, though, with some of these monitors. And to your point, if you can stomach it, it's not doing any detriment to the animal, but
It
it
is
uh
hard.
it,
I had it with
it can be
Gilleni.
nerve-wracking as a keeper.
I ripped a whole. So basically, my Gilleni enclosure. So I've got a 4 foot long, 3 foot tall, 2 foot deep that I have my group of Gilleni in. And I put all real oak bark. I foamed it all to the background. It looked beautiful, stunning. And my big female is a right bitch, and she attacks my other two. Not the role that they do, but she proper bites and shakes them.
Yep,
So my small female, so my big female's going. I've sold her. She's going. I'm going to keep her babies back because she's unrelated to my other one. So I'm going to keep her babies back and hopefully introduce another female to the group in a few years. But anyway, I hadn't seen the small female for a couple of weeks, and I was worried. Normally, I'm a bit like, they'll be all right. But because
Yeah.
there's multiple animals and there's multiple moving parts, I don't know if she's eating, because obviously the other 3 can be stealing the food and bits and bobs.
Yep.
So I was like, oh, fuck it. And I went to town on the enclosure and I pulled all of and I ripped it apart, and it looks horrendous now. And she was just there and she was like, hello. And I was like, fucking bitch, man.
Yeah.
Like, and she was fine. And I was
Yep.
just like, oh, but for the most part, I had Timorensis, so very similar to Affenbergi.
Yep.
Though I hated them. I hate because I never saw them ever.
Yeah.
And I was just like, are they alive? Like, the male was pretty bold. The male would stay out. The female, I just never saw them. I had a 1.2, never saw them. And I had them in a bigger enclosure, never saw them. Put them in a smaller enclosure, never saw them. My friend has them now in a fucking massive enclosure, and the male's out all the time.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, honestly, because I had them in a 4x2x4, 4 tall, 4 wide, 2 deep.
Yep. Okay.
Never saw them at all. Like, and I've had these animals from babies.
Yep.
Put them in a 4 long, 3 tall, 2 deep, so a foot shorter.
Yep.
The male was out all the time. I say all the time. The male was out quite a lot. But that was it. I might see the big female's head out of a cork tube. That was it.
And these are the Timorensis you're talking about.
Timors, yeah.
Give me, hey Paul, give me 1 second.
Yeah, no
I'll
worries.
I'll be right back, man.
No, that's cool, man. That's cool. I'm gonna
1
keep up
minute.
with the chat. Yeah, no worries. That was my question. Is it better to go from a small to medium, large reptile? I think it depends on what you want from your animal. Because again, if you want to socialize it, you're probably better off starting. You probably are better off starting in small, but don't do empty. I'm not a fan of empty. If it's small, make sure it's still fairly cluttered. I've barely seen any of my Jobies dig, so I wondered if. Yeah, I think it is more of an Indicus thing. Toad has buried herself a few times in the past, more so when she was younger. She's really taken to water nowadays, though. Like, she really has. So now she's in the bigger enclosures. She's got the big water bowl, and she fucking loves it. She's in the water bowl like all the time. So I would say they're a lot more inclined, because I don't see the mangroves in water. Like, Mango has a big pond. My other ones have a big ponds. The mangroves obviously swim, but they don't spend as much time in the water. Do you need any more drinks? I'm going to bed soon. No. Have you changed your picture? Oh wow, look at us looking cute. Was your picture always that? Wait, what? Why do you have 2 pictures? I'm so confused. Anyway, no, I'm all good. Thank you. But yeah.
All right, man. I'm back.
All right, cool. No, yeah, so Timors, and now my friend has them in a 6 foot tall, 4 foot wide, 2.5 foot deep. So a big enclosure. The males are out. The male's out all the time, and tongue feeds now. Comes to his hand for tongue feeding. The 2 females are still very shy. So I think the key point is it's very undervalued what you're able to do and watch your animals all day, because a lot of us, like myself, my lights come on 10 o'clock in the morning and they go off at 10, 11 o'clock at night. And I get home roughly about 5 o'clock. So I can spend about 5 hours with them. And I pretty much do spend the whole 5 hours. So half of their day, I am pretty much in my reptile room. But a lot of behaviors and a lot of activities are going to be missed, because that first 5 hours, they're going to wake up, they're going to go about their day, they're going to do their stuff. So it's hard to know if an animal will benefit from certain things if you can't observe it exhibiting certain behaviors because you're not around. And there's no one's fault. We all work day jobs for the most part, like I do. So being able to sort of see your animals and see how it works, because I have a friend as well that has frilled dragons, and in a big enclosure, they don't move. They just stay dead still. In a smaller enclosure, they're really active. They're running around. They're doing a lot more. So, again, I'm not anti-small enclosure. And I was just saying, like, for a second just then about starting babies off. Like, I'm not a fan of empty enclosures. I see a lot of people, I don't know what your opinion is on this, but I see a lot of people put monitors in completely empty enclosures to force them to interact with the keeper. Now, I think there's a massive difference between putting an animal in a small enclosure in comparison to an empty enclosure. Like, where do you sit with that?
Yeah, I've heard this take from a guy I work with actually a lot. He likes to keep his babies enclosures empty to force them to be out and about. I don't do that. I honestly, with the exception, I'm just trying to think of the babies that I've produced, like Ackies, Tristies are a little on the shy side, but most of my babies are out and about with or without hiding spots in their cage, to be completely honest with you. So I have heard exactly what you're talking about, where people will kind of intentionally withhold cage furnishings. So it kind of forces them to be out in the open. I don't do that. My baby enclosures are pretty busy. Like if I take pictures of them, there's lots of cork tubes and places for them to hide and stuff, but they're still out and about most of the time anyway.
Yeah, I find if you give them places to hide, they're more likely to be
To
out.
come out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's what
Yeah,
I
I
find.
think so. Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of again.
So,
Like I'm
like I said, I mean, to each their own. There's more than one ways to skin a cat. The one guy that I know has certainly had success breeding animals and has bred hundreds of monitor lizards, and that's just, he thinks it helps with socialization not to have it in there. I just, if an animal wants to hide, I would like it to have the ability to hide. You know what I mean? So,
yeah,
and that's natural for these animals to hide. So,
yeah, I'm pro-choice in the sense of if an animal wants to choose to swim, it can. If
yep,
it wants to
yep,
choose to climb, it can. If it wants to choose to
yep,
hide, it can.
yep,
Again, I think there's a massive distinction as well. I just want to say, because we're obviously talking about captive bred animals, but I want a wild caught animal in a small empty enclosure is a fucking terrible idea.
yeah, yeah,
Terrible idea. That's going to stress that animal out, and that parasitic load is going to overtake it. And if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to have a dead animal. A captive
yep,
bred animal, it's a little bit different.
yep,
Yeah, they're still flighty. Yeah, they want to hide, but they don't know any different than
right,
all of a sudden a person just being in front of them.
yep,
I get quite a lot of flack for keeping my mangroves in bigger enclosures with lots of stuff and lots of dirt, because everyone's like, "Oh no, they'll never trust you." I'm like, I've ripped them from the wild and thrown them in a box. like,
yeah,
they're not going to be my best friend tomorrow, are they? Like,
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah,
it's one of them things. It is one of them things, and like you say, there is definitely more than one way to do lots of things. Here's an interesting question on space then. And again, I'm not trying to catch you out. It's just your opinion.
yep.
If I was to buy a tree monitor from you and
Mm-hmm.
I'm a novice and I've never kept them before, and I'm like, okay, what sort of size enclosure would I be expecting for an adult? What size would you tell me as someone that I'm just planning on keeping this one tree monitor? Like, what would you say to me?
I like 6x4x2s but what I did, so I for a long time kept 6x4x2s with 6 high,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm in the process of changing those to 4 high and 6 wide and 2 deep. And I've also played with a couple other um, design sizes. So I have some cages now, and this was more had to do with the space that I had available, but that are 4x4x3. So I sacrificed a couple feet in one direction, but added a foot of depth. And I actually love the way those cages turned out. And so
Mm.
one of the things that I've found, and I changed a couple things again, I'm a player around with stuff, right? So my wild caught pair of Prasinus, the ones that I got from that Sotolsky character, that's where they were older than my captive bred trio. So the captive, I have a trio of captive bred that were raised together that were all, they're probably just a little over 3 years old now. So they've only been laying eggs for a little over a year, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And my captive bred. So one interesting thing about my tree monitors, and again, I don't know if I'm doing something wrong or, to each lizard their own, if you will, I guess. But most of my females, actually none of my females, really bury their eggs very deep whatsoever, which
Okay.
is interesting because I've heard from others like
You go
Cody
right down.
that they'll go all the way down to whatever lay box they have available. And so anyway, I my wild caught pair female, she has an elevated nest box. I built her cage before I kept any monitors ever. So I had this like little elevated nest box. It's only literally probably about 4 inches deep, like one of those flat little boxes that I had built into her cage. And it's like right up in the top corner of her cage. So I had that cage built when they were, right when I first got them. Now that I know a ton about tree monitors, like I would build something that could hold some, dirt and something a little deeper. She has laid every single clutch of eggs in that little nest box, and she has never, ever, ever been picky about her eggs. She's taken a few months off, but for like a year and a half there, she'd lay every 4 months or every 3 months like clockwork. And every time she'd lay, I had a real deep nest box in the bottom of her cage with a heat pad, with everything regulated and stuff like that. She'd never lay in them. She'd lay up in her upper lay box every single time. She'd go in at lights out, and she'd be in the morning. And just about every time she'd lay me four good eggs. And so again, only buried probably an inch below the surface. My captive bred females did not like their lay areas at first. And so I was chasing eggs a few times with them. I actually had one literally lay in my hand one day. She had her ass hanging out of her nest box for whatever reason. She had a nest box down on her lay floor, and she was in her laying trance, and I could tell she had her butt sticking out of her lay box. She actually popped out an egg right into my hand. It was actually pretty wild. But anyway, one of the things I found is I feel like those captive bred females, now that I've moved them to shorter cages and they're wider, they've got about the same spatial area on the walls and stuff. And I cork all my walls or have climbable walls anyway. And since I've moved them to shorter cages, I've had zero nesting issues. And their lay boxes are on the floor, but they're only in 4-foot tall cages now. And they go in and they'll dig down. Again, they're in 7-gallon totes, so they're about 12-inch tall totes, but they'll only dig like 3 or 4 inches down in the substrate and lay their eggs and come back out. And since I've moved them to those 4 by 3 cages, I've had no nesting issues out of those females whatsoever. So I don't know, again, if it's a height thing, if they like. So obviously, being that they're in shorter cages, there's a lot more going on the bottom of their cage, and they spend a lot of time now, not on the bottom of their cage, but in that lower third of their cage. So again, this is just things that I've kind of found and things that I've tweaked with a little bit. And those females lay me 7-8 clutches. That's the one picture that you shared. That was one of those females that had laid that clutch. And I fought nest boxes with them for a while, and I don't know if it was the tall cages or what, but again, so kind of went on a bit of a tangent there, but
it's interesting because so basically, long story short, when my Kimberleys sell at the end of next month, I'm buying a new enclosure for my male Prasinus. So I have a adult male sarong who's a wild caught, long-term captive. He's been in captivity for about 4 years now. Came in as a baby. He's been with me for 2 and a bit years of his 4 and a bit years in captivity. And then I have my captive bred. I'm hoping it's a female. It's not quite one yet. So I'm not going to be like, yeah, it's definitely a female, but it looks female. There's no lump. There's no bulge. There's no, like, the tail base sinks in a little bit at the hip. The head shape looks right. She's got a bit longer torso, all this other like little signs. Anyway, so I toyed with the idea because, again, you have to build enclosures to fit your room. You can't just go, let's get this enclosure and then have higgledy-piggledy, because it just doesn't work because you lose space.
Yeah, so I'm finding that out. Yeah.
Yeah. So I toyed with the idea of going because I have an 8x3x3 in my room, 8 foot long, 3 foot tall, 3 foot deep.
Yeah.
Toyed, and that's on the floor. And then I toyed with the idea of getting an 8 foot long, 3 foot deep, 4 foot tall for the Prasinus. So it's nice and long.
Yep.
3 foot in depth, really nice and deep, and then 4 foot
Yep.
tall, but it's already 3 foot off the floor. So the
Yep.
tree monitor would be 3 foot to 7 foot.
Yep.
And I'm only
Yep.
a short man, so that it could get above me still. I was like, okay, that could, because then that goes straight on top of the 8x3x3. The space works. And I toyed with that. And I've decided against that because where that 8x3x3 now is going to become my audacious wall. So it doesn't work. So I'm going to go for a 6 foot long, 2.5 foot deep, 6 foot tall.
Okay.
Because I can fit that in there. And I can't be bothered to do the maths, but I'm pretty sure the 8 foot by 3 foot by 4 foot is much bigger area wise.
Yeah,
but
I think so.
So if I said to someone, "Oh, I'm thinking about putting a tree monitor in 8 foot long, 4 foot tall, 3 foot deep," they'd go, "You're fucking crazy. They're tree monitors. They live in the trees."
Right.
And I'm like, "Well, let me explain." But anyway, for how my room works, the 6x2.5x6 is going to work better.
Yep.
So it's going to go in a 6x2.5x6. And what I find so funny is someone will look at that and go, "Oh my God, that's a great size enclosure for Prasinus." And then the other size, which is like, not, I don't know the maths, but say double the area.
Yep.
They go, no, it's too small. So again, to that, just that little nuance on the enclosure sizes. But anyway, so he's going in that. And then so he's currently in a 5 foot tall, 4 foot wide, 2 foot deep. And if I'm honest, I personally think it's too small. He's a big Prasinus. He's just shy
5x4x2.
Yeah, it's 5 tall, 4 wide, 2 deep.
Yep.
He's been in that since pretty much I got him, and if I'm honest, I think it's too small. But again, that's my line and my animal.
Yep.
So then my young one, my baby, who's been in the 4 tall, 3 wide, 2 deep since I've got her, she's still in it, and it's still okay for her if I'm honest. She's going to go into his enclosure once it's done, and then once she goes in with him one day, hopefully in the 6x2.5x6, I'm going to put my Gilleni in the 5 tall by 4 wide by 2 deep, just to sort of see what happens, because that's massive for little Gilleni.
That is.
Yeah.
You got a pretty good little group though, right?
I want to try a 2.4 in that size enclosure. I have 1.3 right now. One female's going, so I have 1.2, but I'm holding babies back from her. And if I can hold back 2 females and then find another male somewhere else, then I'll have 2 sisters, and then I'll have 2.2 unrelated, and then 2.4 unrelated other than the 2 sisters, if that makes sense. So they'll be unrelated to each other, and I'll have 2 females that are related, but they're not related to the males. But I want to try a 2.4 in that big size enclosure. I don't know if he's still here, but Mr. Scandinavian Iguanas keeps Gilleni in a big tall enclosure. And
cool.
He told me, so this is sort of a transition, but you sort of said we'll touch on Gilleni at the minute earlier in the podcast. So I'm going to touch on them now because I think they're incredible. I have an arboreal nest box and a low level nest box in my Gilleni enclosure, and they always nest arboreally. So I don't know if it's something because you're saying about the shallow one for your Prasinus. I don't know if you could try something like that for your Gilleni. I don't know how successful you are or aren't with them. I'm not
very successful with them. So Gil and I have been. So I have a pair.
Yeah.
And they were supposedly proven. Here's the deal, though, and I'm desperately hoping I didn't screw this up somehow. So I bought a trio, and it was 2 males and a female, not a good trio, the reverse trio.
Yeah.
And the 2 males fought, and I kept them for a while, and I decided just to sell one of the spare males. And so
when you say fought, do you mean wrestle or biting each other?
Both. Biting and wrestling a little bit. So the guy was apparently keeping all 3 of them together, but he told me, he's like, the males have really started to get after each other lately. I don't know if you're going to be able to keep them together for that long. So I got them, and it was the same kind of thing. It was how do I put it? I will allow wrestling. So I like having extra males and stuff around, and I've had good luck with like Tristies and Kimberleys, like even keeping them in groups 2.2s, even for extended periods at times. But even if not for extended periods, just having an extra male is nice because it can,
spur it on a little bit.
get them going. So I ended up selling one of the Gilleni and one of the Gilleni males because I didn't have extra cages at the time and stuff, and so I sold one of the males, and I've kept that pair, but I've had them for about a year, and I have not seen any breeding activity out of the pair, and I'm pretty damn positive like I didn't accidentally screw up and send one of the females because they look dimorphic to me. It certainly looks like a male and a female, but I'm just seeing no breeding activity out of them whatsoever. I have a lay box in there, nothing arboreal lay box. But I do have a lay box in there for them. And actually, for the first time ever, the female was digging in the lay box a couple weeks ago, but I haven't seen any breeding or anything.
They're the same as Aki's. They get big. They're plump. If she's gravid, you'd know.
If she's gravid.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's weird because I'm used to, so I have some animals that don't breed particularly well for me. My Beckeri, I'm fairly sure I have females that are cycling and my males just are not interested so far. I just got one of my males in the last month or two, so hopefully that will get things going. But I don't know. I don't know that I'm seeing the Gilleni female cycling, whereas I'm pretty sure my Beckeri females are cycling. Like, I can see them swelling and stuff like that. So I actually just picked up another young pair of Gilleni that I'm raising, and hope, they're only 6 or 7 months old, so they probably got another 6 or 7 months at least till they start, thinking about breeding. But I'm hoping some new blood will spark that, because I haven't I've never produced Gilleni. That's something that I haven't gotten to breed for me yet. So
what I will say from what I've learned, I've only had them since January, being quite successful with them, because I know a few keepers can't double clutch them, and both my females, like I say, 45 days, 43 days. So to me, that's consistency. And then, like I say, this third female, hopefully she'll go, and she'll be mid-August if she does. What I will say is, from when I speak to people, males don't fight, only females fight.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. It's a head fuck, because everything you know about monitors doesn't apply to Gilleni. I've never kept two males, so I personally cannot say to you, because the group I brought was either 2.2 or 1.3.
Yep.
Now, I was convinced it was a 2.2 because 2 were constantly wrestling. So I got them in January, winter. February was really cold for us. Coming into March, end of March, we started to hit spring. So end of March, more or less April, they came up and were a bit more active. So they were pretty much dormant January, February, March. They started to come up and were active in April. So I sprayed the hell out of them every day, wet season. Because in the wild, when they come out of their cold period, they hit a wet season, and that's when they breed. So I sprayed them heavy every day in the morning to allow it to get completely dry again, because they're quite hot. I keep them quite hot. They're a 60 degree basking spot, 20, I don't know what it is, Fahrenheit. Mid 80s, like ambience, like hot. But then I spray them heavy every day. For the whole of, where were we? January, February, March, April. For the whole of April, to no avail. Then I started spraying them like 2 or 3 times a week in May, and I started getting locks. But throughout April and May, 2 of them were just at each other, just wrestling at each other constantly. And I was like, okay, must be the 2 males just fighting for dominance. And I'm okay with tussles. I'm not a fan of biting. As soon as a monitor bites another monitor, something's wrong, in my opinion. So you split them. And then I had one that was biting and going. And I was like, oh my god! And I messaged a few people. So after this, send me some pictures of your pair, and I'll either send it to some people that I know that are better than me, or I'll take a look at them, because I've done a lot of looking into Gilleni since this, because I realized I was about to fuck up. And I sent them, they were like, oh no, that's 2 females. I'm like, nah, like, look at the bulbous noses. They've got like the shorter heads. These are males. And they're like, no, they're females. And I was like, No, they're not. Anyway, sure enough, they laid eggs, all 3 of them. I'm like, well, I've definitely have, because I saw the female cycle get big, they swell up, they plump, and then when they lay, you think Ackies are skinny when they lay. A Gilleni literally looks like you run it over with like a 20-ton truck. Like, they are bad.
How many eggs do they lay?
So first clutch I got 6, 5 good. Second clutch 6, 5 good. Third clutch 7, 6 good. Then second clutch from first female, 5 and 5 good, and second clutch from second female, 5 good. But between 3 and 5 as average, so 6,
Okay.
7, 8 is a big clutch. So
Cool.
mine have all had big clutches. Eggs are about the same size as Aki eggs when they come out. And they're also known, apparently, to calcium crash. So you need to make sure that you are giving them good supplementation because apparently they will crash. But females wrestle and tussle and females bite each other and females seem to establish this hierarchy dominance. And I think King Gorum are the same. But I've never kept King Gorum, but one of my friends has King Gorum and he sees the same behaviors. And it's not the males that chase each other, it's the females. So I think those tiny little Odatria, they seem to be backwards. You put 2 Mayanakis together, that's it. They're at it. 2 Tristus, they're at it. 2 Kims, they're at it. Whereas Gilleni, the males don't seem to care. And that's why I want to try a 2.4. But I found with a group of 3, I don't know if it's just this one female or if it's because 1.3 doesn't work, but this one female literally bites and shakes the other 2 females and will chase them off the basking spot. And it's dominance behavior. It's not aggression. It is dominance. And she'll pin them and she'll get on top of them. And she'll almost be like, this is my spot. I'm the man, if you like.
Yep.
They're very quirky in that regard. They're very different. They act like a dwarf tree monitor, but their behaviors are very much for breeding. I've seen 2 locks, 1 on each female. Otherwise, I've seen no breeding behavior. I've seen cuddling. Like I've seen them like male, like with his hand over the girl. I've seen that sort of behavior quite regularly. And I've seen the male caught like her face and neck. But I've literally seen 2 locks. That's it. 1 with one female, 1 with another female. But I have lots of cork tubes and I have lots of cracks and crevices in my enclosure, so they can do it wherever in privacy. But I think the key is the humidity because I keep mine probably around 70% at this time of the year. I'll be dropping it down as we get into August, September. I'll be dropping it down. But I'm spraying them 2 or 3 times a week at the minute. And and they bounce back quite quickly as well. I didn't want her to go back to back 45 days. I didn't know what to expect. But when they laid again, I was like, Jesus fucking Christ. Like, that's quick. Because I'm still learning.
You're keeping them all in the same cage and stuff. And it sounds like you're getting eggs pretty regularly. How do the females do with each other laying? And do you get like guarding of the nest box and shit like that? No?
No. So the only dominance I see is that one female. So the other 2 females. So I've got big female, 2 females. I call one the nice female because she's still got her banding, and then the other one's just a female. So the nice female and the normal female will sometimes tussle, but they'll wrestle, and that's it. The big female will bully the other 2. They're the male. I barely see him. He's hardly out. He has one spot he likes and he hides. Like I see his head. And even when it comes to feeding, like he's not a male monitor. A male monitor comes out, pushes the girls out of the way, and takes all the food. But he doesn't do that. He just sits. He is quite porky. He came to me quite porky. So maybe that's why he's not so food aggressive, because the females are all in good shape, whereas the male is overweight. But yeah, so the nest, as regards to nesting, I know a keeper here in the UK. He had a female lay. So let's just say on Monday. So he went to dig the eggs up on Tuesday. There was another female in there laying. So he left it and hoped she wasn't raiding. And then he dug up 2 clutches on Wednesday.
And he got 2 clutches.
Yeah, 2 clutches. Yeah. Then they didn't. It wasn't raiding. It was just nesting.
So you said a bunch of things that are really interesting to me and that stick out. So I used to keep more things in groups
Mm.
than I do now. I'm actually in the process of breaking up quite a few things and trying to keep single females together. So, for example, I used to keep like Ackies in 1.2s and 1.3s, and I still have some that I do. But one thing I've found is that females, and so a couple points I was going to make. So
Yeah.
I'll get back to the eggs in a second. The other thing I was going to say is I'm a firm believer. Another thing that I've learned is there are generalities with species and things like that. But man, each individual animal is their own individual animal.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one thing that I have absolutely learned, over and over and over again. There are generalities that you can follow and stuff, but you got to know your animals. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, bottom line.
100%.
And it's interesting to me because you were talking about like some of the odatrias and like how you see wrestling between females and stuff like that. And I keep so a lot of my the way I used to keep like Ackies and Tristies and even Kimberleys. So that group of Kimberleys that I just cranked eggs out of. What I found is that it seemed like initially this didn't seem to be near as big of an issue when they first started laying, but eventually I got to the point where one female stopped laying, and it was clearly the non-dominant female. The other female was the much more dominant female, and I've started seeing this in Ackies as well, where females appear to actually guard their nest boxes even when there's not eggs in it. It's almost like, hey, I know what you're going
Mm.
to use
Yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah.
I've got a trio of yellow Ackies right now. I'm working on finishing a cage, and I'd like to get the second yellow Ackie out, not because I see any fighting or anything, but because I have one yellow Ackie that's laid 2 clutches of eggs for me this year, and the other yellow Ackie female looks big, but
Mm.
not cycling big. And I'm convinced it's because the other female likes to sit in the entrance of the lay box.
Yeah.
So this all goes back to the age old debate you were asking about, like productivity and obviously if you can keep a trio of Ackies like a 1.3 and a 6x2x2 or 6x3x2 or something like that, that's better than keeping three
Yeah.
females
In
in
4x2
three
by
four
twos.
by
Yeah.
two by twos.
Yeah.
But what I'm finding out is your productivity is going to be nowhere near the same from those three females. So one of the reasons I was asking about all that is because I find it interesting that you've had such good luck with three Gilleni laying eggs all in one cage back to back that
Mm.
much. So another example I just had of this is, and this has just played out itself over the last month or 2 months. I had in my experience the best group monitors that I've had raising babies and stuff has actually been the Tristies. I've never had any cannibalism. I've never had any real picking on each other, anything like that. And I've kept them in groups 2.2 before 2.3, 1.3. Like I've played with the way I've kept them. And I just recently split up my adults that I had been keeping as 2.2s and 1.2s and 1.3s, and I just split them up. And literally within a month of splitting them up, both females laid eggs, and they hadn't laid eggs for me. One female had recently, but the other female hadn't. And so I am now a firm believer, and I've had this discussion with people that I think females have a lot of choice in whether they're going to go all the way and lay eggs. Like I think there's a lot of um there's I mean, essentially at some point they make the decision, okay, do I have an adequate lay site? Do I
Yeah.
have, and whether they're going to ovulate and stuff. And I think that a female's presence to other females and stuff is a pretty huge factor in whether or not they're going to lay eggs. So it's interesting though, because your success with your Gilleni is interesting because I've had relatively similar success with some of the smaller ones too, the King Orem in particular. The females don't really seem to care about other females being there with King Orem in my experience. So I have not seen much fighting with my female King Orems, and all my females seem to lay eggs, whether they're in 1-2s, 1-1s, 1-3s. It doesn't seem to make near as big of a difference as like with the Ackies and the Tristies and the Kimberleys and stuff like that. So that's that's interesting to me.
I think as well it's part of the natural ecology though, because if you look at them in the wild, King Orem are all going to be clustered under one rock. They've been found in groups under one rock. Tristis, Gilleni have been found all under the same piece of bark on one tree in groups. Tristis for the most part are solitary. Glaudi for the most part are solitary. They're going to be found in the same area, but they're not found next to each other. Ackies in the wild are social. So that's interesting. You've seen that in Ackies. I've experienced that with Ackies because I had a 1.2, and they for the most part got on outside of when a female was breeding the male. The one that was then being bred would bully the shit out of the other female.
Out of the other one,
yeah. I've had that, but for the most part, be okay. And then I've also had my female. So my pair live together in a 6x2x2. I only have a pair now. I moved on one female, so I have a pair that live 24/7 together in a 6x2x2. I used to pull the male when the female would lay. My male's not an egg eater. He doesn't. But I used to do it just to not stress her out. When I would reintroduce, she would beat the shit out of him.
Oh, really?
She would not take him back for months. And so much so that I had to wait until she cycled again, put him in when she cycled.
Wow.
And then I had to leave him in, and she was fine. Fine. But if I pull him out, for example, for a week, I guarantee you she won't take him back.
Interesting.
I don't know why. But the other female, no matter when I put him in, she was completely 100% receptive. If she was cycling or not cycling, she was fine. Tristis, I have kept Tristis. I've never tried to breed them. I only had young Tristis. But I know several people that have kept Gilleni in groups, and most people keep them in the Exoterra, the biggest Exoterra. So not as big as I keep mine in either. So they're in a more confined situation, and a couple of people keep 1.3. I can think of 3 keepers that kept in a 1.3 with a one kept 1.3 in the biggest Exoterra, 36, 18, 36. I've had no issues. They see the same as I have with the wrestling with the females, every single one of them. The odd nipping here and there, but the nesting, they've never had an issue.
Interesting. I'm wondering now, are your animals pretty sexually dimorphic? Like, can you look in and just immediately see the difference? No.
My male, I can tell is my male because he's all silver. Let me see if I can bring up a video. But
is
my
he
male,
bigger than your females or not?
My big female, the one I'm selling, is about the same size as him.
Okay.
The other 2 females are substantially smaller than both. My big female, for the longest time, because she was wrestling with other people as well, I assumed she was a male, and I assumed it was a 2.2. I can tell the difference now because I've seen them, but I did a lot of research on Gilleni. So let me find a video. Okay, so bear with me 2 seconds and I'll share my screen. All right, where is it? Add to stream. Let me put this on full screen. So, bear with me. As my internet doesn't want to load. I'll zoom in. So, this is a terrible video of it. I'll see if I can find better. So that's the big female there on the left eating now.
Okay.
So that's the big female. She's just laid. That's why she's skinny. But it's obviously not clear. That's a small female.
Okay.
And then that's a small female and the big female wrestling. But the male's nowhere to be seen. Like, it's dinner time and the male is nowhere near.
Interesting.
I don't think I took any sensible videos of them. Like, obviously on my Instagram it's a bit different to what's on my phone. I can send you like pictures and stuff. So this again, just a small female.
I'm starting to wonder if I even have a pair.
Send me some pictures.
Yeah, I will. They're definitely one is bigger than the other.
So that's a female. That's a female. That's a female.
Yeah, those are the smaller ones are small.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
I've got two really.
I'll send you some pictures. I'll send you some
Yeah.
pictures of mine.
Yeah, send me some pictures because worst case, I have a couple of people that I know a lot more than me, and if you're happy for me to forward it onto them, I'll just forward it onto them. So yeah, here you go. So this is actually the male. So the male is underneath.
Yeah.
And there's a female on top, and the female's cuddling him. He's got his back leg over her, but he's not cuddling her. She's cuddling him.
Yeah.
And then I need to find it now.
It's hard to tell. His head looks a little bigger than hers, is it or not?
Yeah,
not
it
much.
Is.
Yeah, it is. Oh wow, and they're breeding, eh?
Yeah, give it a sec. He like proper gives it to her as well. Like
yeah, there you go.
It's just like, but yeah, let me zoom into the heads. His head is bigger, but between him and the big female, there's not a lot.
Yeah.
But that's why I thought I had a 2.2. Him and the two females makes a lot of sense, but between him and the big female, there's not a lot of difference.
Yeah.
And I've been told that some Gilleni are quite masculine. So like, I'll try and send it to you. I'll do it now because I will forget. So I don't know if you've got the book. I think it's Danny Brown, the Australian Keeper's Guide to Reptiles or whatever it is.
I have a big monitors book. I don't know if it's that one or not. I've got a bunch of the books, but
yeah, I mean, I'm
not sure if I have that one or not. I might.
I don't read, but I did buy the book. I haven't read it yet, but I took a picture of. There's a picture in there. I've just sent it to you now on Facebook, just so I'll forget. It's basically it's a vent shot of Gilleni, which is a pretty obvious picture. But when I look at my Gilleni, all four of them, I can see the male is exactly the same as the picture, and the two females are exactly the same as the picture. But the big female, she's in the middle. But I know I've had eggs from her, so I know she's a female.
Yeah.
And I'll be completely honest, I was a bit worried that I've sold it to someone as a female. I'm like, but is it a female? Like, I didn't want to be that guy. But now she's laid. I'm like, okay, she's definitely a female.
Yeah.
But like I say, with the Gilleni, for the most part, and it seems to be like I say, mine laid 2 days of each other, 1st and 3rd of June, and this other guy's laid literally pretty much 18 hours within each other. So it sounds like they are all on the same cycle. They're all in the same.
Yeah.
My big female was a month out. She was 1st of July, and the other ones were the 1st of June. But I know other keepers that have had eggs within the same day or two from different females. So there's clearly something. There's not just,
Yeah.
So they're
Are Gilleni common over there or not particularly?
So there's 4, maybe 5 people working with them, but not many. Myself and one other keeper are being quite successful. I haven't hatched any yet, so again, I'm not counting them until they hatch. I've got a lot of eggs, but I've never hatched Gilleni before, so I'll find out in 110 days. But yeah, there's only 2 of us that are double clutching. For the most part, everyone gets like 1 clutch from the year. But I've spoken to Aussies, and some Aussies say they'll have 5 to 7 clutches. Like
it's interesting. Like I said, in my experience, the smaller the monitor, the more they lay, kind of in general. But the more frequent they lay anyway. But that's I don't. There's Gilleni are becoming more and more rare here. It seems like I got this young pair that I took to the show more just to put them on my table than anything else, so people could see them. And just tons of people said they hadn't seen Gilleni for sale in years, which they're becoming pretty rare. So
I think they are quite hard to breed. I think people can't crack them.
Yeah, that could be.
Yeah. Yep. I think people, because they are quite ugly as adults in the sense they're not colourful like a tree monitor.
Yep.
People aren't as bothered. But for me, honestly, I genuinely reckon they're the best pet monitor for across the board. You know, they're small, they have great
Yep.
personalities, they're all
Yep.
monitor.
Yep.
They aren't stupidly expensive, at least here in the UK. You're talking like I'm probably going to be selling trios in the sense of 3 animals, obviously not sex, but one from each female from like 850 odd, something like that. Like not a lot of money. Um it's a shame they lose their banding, but for me
Yeah.
they're incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, they're cool. They're fun. Mine are not shy. They're not the world's most active little lizard, but they're certainly not shy. Yeah, I like them. They're a good species to work with. I do agree their size is great. It does suck that they lose their banding and stuff because they
Yeah.
are a little bit drab. But so I mean, honestly, so are Primordius and some of those smaller ones. So yeah, I really hopefully I can get this pair that I have figured out so that I can get them going.
Yeah, send me, like I said, when you got 10 minutes,
Yeah.
send me some pictures.
Yeah. Yeah, I
And
will for sure.
if I don't know, I'll be able to forward it on to someone that does.
Yeah, definitely.
There's a couple of people I speak to in Europe that breed them. So
Yeah.
and they've helped me out quite a lot. But yeah, let's we sort of digressed quite a lot. Is there anything else that you wanted to, because I'm not going to start wrapping up just yet, but we're at the 3 hour mark, so we'll start wrapping
Yeah.
up soonish. Is there anything else you want to sort of touch on, or you feel like we haven't touched on before I just sort of throw a few questions randomly at you?
No, yeah, like I said, I mean, if there are any questions, specific to breeding or keeping, anything, I'm open. Just like we talked about, just chat monitors, man. So whatever.
I want to touch on the
If you
Prasinus
more-
breeding, because
Yep.
for me, a lot of people. So like I've regularly got eggs every 90 days roughly from my mangrove monitor. Now people are like, oh yeah, it's season, you get them cold, and then they, then you bring up the temperature and you get them wet and you feed them more, and then they'll cycle, right? That's the common throw it out there. But I've had clutches from my mangrove when I'm in winter and I'm not feeding her and she's dry. So, and if you're saying you're Prasinus, like my friend who breeds them, he's pretty much been every 90 to 100 days gets a cycle. And I think same as Cody, I'm pretty sure he's every 90 odd days. So it seems to be that magic number for these Indonesian species. When you come to breeding them and cycling them and bits and bobs like that, do you think there is a magic? Do you think once they're dialed in, they're dialed in? Is there any little nuances, subtle changes you do with them, or not really?
So yes and no. That's it. So I think that in my experience, so it's an interesting question because to your point, from what I've heard, once you get a pair breeding, it can almost be in times a challenge to get them not to breed.
Yeah,
So
my friends have
Cody's
this.
yeah, so Cody's, I think it was Cody specifically that I was talking to, and he said he wanted to give his female a break, and so he unpaired them, and he said she went and produced a clutch of duds anyway. And so it's interesting because I think personally, to answer your question, I don't think we know for sure whether the animals are keying on something we are or aren't doing to get them to start breeding, or whether they're so genetically inclined to reproduce that once they start breeding, they're not that picky about the seasonal cycling. Because to your point, it seems like Prasinus, so my wild caught pair, for example, seemed like for about a year, they produced a clutch every 4 months. Now, every 3 months, for a year, every 3 months. So now I kind of want to give that female a break. I have been I've got their mist king off now, and I'm doing all my misting by hand. My male is still trying to breed, but my female has been resistant to his breeding advances lately. And so I actually took the male out, put him in another cage because I normally don't ever split that pair up, but normally it's lay eggs, a month later they're breeding, a month after that, or in that time frame. It's basically every 3 months, like you kind of pointed out, every 90 to 100 days, and they were on that cycle. So I have intentionally kept them a little bit drier, and the female seems resistant now to breeding, which is the first time I've seen that in a year or a year and a half. So whether that's influenced by what I'm doing by keeping them a little bit drier, I'm not entirely sure. It very well could be. It probably is. My other Prasinus have actually slowed down breeding as well. So they were younger, and so they hadn't produced as consistently. So I haven't been quite as keyed on cutting down their misting and stuff like that. But I have a little bit, and they have not been breeding for the last month or two as either. So I'm assuming that's directly related to kind of how much I'm misting and stuff. And that's kind of, been the rule of thumb with tree monitor breeders, right? Is when you want them to breed, you keep them wetter and mist them more and stuff like that. So now, with all that being said, I have not had a lot of luck getting my Beckeri to breed based on cycling of misting. But I have only had the one male with 2 females. I've had 2 females up until this summer anyway, and I'm now keeping them intentionally drier. So all this being said, I think that it's very possible to keep, if you get a pair of monitors, tree monitors breeding, I think it's very possible with just food to cycle them and keep them probably breeding steadily. But I do seem to see that they want to slow down a little bit now that I'm not misting as much as I had been. And to be quite honest with you, the main reason I wanted to cut down on misting was, one, because I wanted to this female to give her a little bit of time, and she's gained a lot of weight. She's looking real big now. But I also wanted to see if I cut misting for a couple months on the Beckeri and kept them dry, if I start again heavy here in a month or so, if maybe I can spark breeding from them. So yeah, I think there is cycling that can be done to promote and whatnot breeding. But I also think that once you've got animals going, I don't know that tree monitors, in my opinion, are honestly that picky once they're going, that they need to be given a huge break every year. So
yeah, I've heard Beckeri are quite hard to get to go. I've heard they're one of the harder ones. I've only ever kept Prasinus. I have a 2.1. But yeah, and again, I've never tried to cycle them because my female's too young. She's only coming up a year, so for me, it's all irrelevant. But same as yourself, I have the natural seasons. I have a room that just gets cold in the winter, warms up throughout the summer. There's 110 degrees in my room the other day because my air conditioning broke. Like the tube came out the back and it was pumping air. So I left work to come home because I've got a Wi-Fi thermometer and it just spiked. It was like 45 degrees in the UK, 110, 105. And I came in expecting to find dead lizards. My male Prasinus was basking. My female
lovely.
my female Prasinus was just running around like she normally does. All of my mangroves were out, which never happens ever. The Ackies were loving it, and the Gilleni were like supercharged. And I was like, maybe we keep these animals I'm not recommending we keep these animals that hot, by the way, guys. But I'm just like, maybe we do keep them a little bit too hot, because the enclosures had got to probably mid-90s time when I got home, because obviously the room was heating up. That's what heating the enclosures up, but the room heated up before the enclosures. But the enclosures were hot.
I've had some air conditioning challenges, and I have some cages that the ambient will creep up to like 90 in the day, in hot days, even in the cooler part of the cage. And it used to worry me. And it's still like, I don't like to see it getting any warmer than that, just because I like them to be able to regulate, right? But to your point, I mean, they're not finding many spots in Australia in the summer, even in the shade, I mean, that are 70 degrees or,
No.
whatever. So, yeah, I think these monitors can withstand a little bit of heat. That's for sure. So,
Yeah, they can. I think they can withstand a lot more cold than a lot of people. I don't know what temperatures you go down to, but my room, I'll convert it now. But my room goes down to, bear with me, everybody, 16 degrees Celsius to Fahrenheit. So my room goes down to low 60s in the winter.
yep.
And no to all species and no detriment.
Yeah, mine get down. My garage gets down to mid 60s in the cool parts. So yeah, and I don't see any big issues with that.
I think it helps for the most
Yeah,
part.
for sure, absolutely.
I know some people have spoke about putting certain species into the 50s. Worries me a little bit, but they're having success. So
Yeah, I don't let any of my monitors get that cold. Obviously, I have an entire shed of animals that I brumate every winter, which is nice because it gives me a little bit of relief for three months a year. I get to say goodnight to, about 60 animals. So that's always nice. But yeah, I let it get chilly. I mean, not super chilly, but I'll temp gun like the bottom of my tree monitor cages. And they'll be like 65 during the winter and stuff. Of course, my animals generally aren't down in the bottom of their cages, but and then yeah, some of my lower cages they'll get in about the mid 60s in the winter. So I agree. I think seasonal cycling is nice and needed. I mean, it absolutely is evident with, like I talked about, the tree monitors. I don't see a ton in terms of production and stuff, that like my one pair just kept going for the year. But with Ackies and just about every other species, I mean, this is the busy season, right? Everything's laying eggs right now. And basically once, September, October rolls around, I don't really get many eggs until, April. So October to April or so. So those are kind of the slow months, and yeah, everything just kind of slows down. So
yeah, I'm pretty much the same. I've had this female Aki that lays all these eggs. I've had her before. So last year, she laid, I think it was 9 months of the year. So she would lay, pretty much miss a month, lay. But because of how it was like every 35, 40 days, so how it worked out, she'd laid in like 9 of the months of the year. And I split the male, pulled the male for 2-3 months. She still laid. I dropped her temps. She still laid. I dropped her food. She still laid. I didn't spray her at all. She still laid. And she was just pushing out these slug clutches. And I was like, oh, I'll just put the male back in then. And then this is when I found out she didn't want him back for the first time. So I put the male back in and she just attacked him. And I was like, what the? And most people are like, oh, just let him fight it out. And I'm not a fan of that. So split the male. A week later, tried it again. And I had to wait for her to cycle again, which seemed like forever, because normally she's like boom, boom, boom. But she was obviously like, no, I don't want him back. But now they're back together and they get on. Like he actually like will be in the nest box while she's laying. Like because he likes the nest box as a hide. She'll still just lay. She'll go down and lay. And I'm sort of scared to ruin that now. So for the most part, I just leave them to it. But there's always obviously a worry that she will come up and go, what the fuck are you doing in here, and go for him. But I know she goes for him if I take him out. So I'm going to potentially run that risk anyway. I think a good question to ask, because I didn't ask it earlier, but someone watching this podcast contemplating being a reptile breeder, regardless if it's full-time or not, what's like the best piece of advice that you've learned through going through all of this that you've been through that you'd like to give to someone that's potentially contemplating starting to breed reptiles?
I think the big thing, and I mean, I think this is cliche, but it's true, is don't you cannot get into breeding reptiles if you think you're going to make a shitload of money doing it. And like, if that's the reason you're getting into it, because it is 100,000% a labor of love, right? Like, I've made pretty dang good money at this for the last couple of years. I've done well. I've gotten to the, obviously doing this as a business, I've gotten to the point where I'm certainly spending less money than I'm making now, but it took years and years and years and tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars investing in this hobby. Okay. And I'm going to call it that because it was a hobby, right? I did it because I liked it. Again, I honestly never had any any realistic thought that I'd be doing this full time at 35 years old. But it just kind of worked out that way. I think that the big thing though is you can't go into this expecting to make money. You got to go into it with a love of reptiles first. And if you do that, there is the potential to make some money if you do things right and do things well. But it's a long road, man. Like I said, I at one point used to keep track of how much money I was spending on reptiles, and about a few years into the hobby phase, at that point I had to stop because it was like, there's no way I'm ever going to make this this money back, so to speak. And maybe I have at this point, but the that's not really the point, right? The point is you shouldn't be doing it for for that reason, because that's not what I do. And I don't make it, I'm not making a ton of money. I'm never going to be a millionaire or anything like that, and that's certainly not at all what I want. But if you're doing it because you love it and you enjoy it and it's fun and you're still enjoying it, then there is the potential there one day to at least potentially have a hobby that you can, maybe use to pay for itself, or pay some bills or something like that. But again, if you're getting into it expecting like, oh, I'm going to spend $10,000 this year on some reptiles, and next year they're going to make me $50,000,
Yeah,
that is not how it works. So, that's the big thing. Yeah, do what you like, keep what you like and what you enjoy. And I think the other big thing that probably a lot of people should hear is there are some awesome things that go with keeping monitors and keeping reptiles, but there are also some real shitty things, and there are some real shitty days. And yeah, I just had a clutch of bull snakes hatch the other day, and I've got one with a real deformed head. And like, it's awesome hatching beautiful, perfect Prasinus and being able to show off these awesome, cool babies to the world. And I love getting comments from customers. Oh my God, this is my dream animal. Thank you so much. But there's a lot of crappy things that go along with breeding animals too,
that
like
die, things born
putting
deformed.
yeah, things that die, things that are deformed, things that just won't hatch right, and unfortunately, animals that get sick. And you just gotta, I don't know, plow through it, and don't let yourself get too down and beat up when shitty things happen, because there's lots of really awesome things that happen keeping reptiles too.
So my next question on that then is, Michael's sort of touching on it. So there's this old cliche that if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life, right? Now,
yep, absolutely.
people that know me know I hate my day job. Can't stand it. I find
Your
no
boss isn't listening. We know that, right?
If he is, I don't give a shit because I tell him. I'm the worst employee ever because I literally go, I fucking hate it here.
Right on.
Sadly for me, I'm relatively all right at my job, so he keeps me around. But
There you go.
anyway, I was hoping to catch a live to miss the 3-minute chat. Catch it in the morning. No worries. Thank you for stopping in, Stuart. But yeah, so basically, long story short, I find no substance from my job. So for example, I put up some lights, and lady that I've done it for was like, oh my God, thank you so much. I love them. They're incredible. Couldn't give a shit. Obviously I'm happy that she's happy, but I couldn't give a shit. I sell someone an Aki that I've made no money and I'm actually running at a loss, and I'm like, that was really nice. So my question is the grass greener, or does it just appear greener? Because you've pretty much answered it already. Because like you say, there are some good days and there are some bad days. And the fact that you're still doing it obviously answers my question that clearly the grass is greener. But is it worth it?
Yeah. So, yeah, unequivocally, the grass is greener. So I have to admit. So I don't know that I would say. I don't know. I guess I would say I fucking hated working too, man. Like it's not that I hated my job. I didn't absolutely hate my job. I had a good boss. I had a great schedule, like we already talked about. I made my own schedule, so I had a lot of perks. It was a hard job, a demanding job, but I didn't care about it. Like I didn't like getting up and going to work every Monday, and like it was a grind. It was a job, you know, and I've never really liked that, and so the fact that I have transitioned my hobby into a way to make money is still at times it's overwhelming still at times, like, and you forget it and you don't realize how lucky I am. Like there are not a lot of people that could go out and buy a $5,000 lace monitor and quite frankly not think twice about it. I am so lucky to be able to do that because that's part of my business, and you know that's what I do now. So there's that side of things. There's the animals that I get to work with. I'm so grateful for, because I look at my collection and and again, this may come off a little bit conceited, and I'm not, I don't mean it that way, but it's amazing to me where I was 10 years ago to where I am now, to that point, to be able to go out and buy a 1.3 group of Spencer's monitors and be able to buy a lace monitor. And, I just picked up the group of Primordius last week. And so I'm thankful to have the ability to do that, because even 5 years ago, I didn't. If I wanted to do a $5,000 purchase, it was like, okay, this is going to be one of my big purchases for the year. And so I'm super grateful on just that side of things, just the amazing animals that I get to work with, in and of itself. I'm just so lucky for that respect. But it's also the fact that, yeah, I'm making money doing something that's a hobby. So a lot of people, like a lot of, my relatives and stuff, now that I've done this for a few years, ask me like, how many hours a week do you work? And my funny reply is that I answer to people is, well, pretty much all of them, because I mean, I golf, I'm a Seahawks fan, so I find time to golf and watch my sports and stuff still. But like, my hobby is my job. So like I enjoy, like, I still enjoy cleaning up animal shit. As strange as that sounds, like, playing with my snakes and stuff like that. And like, I still enjoy all that stuff. I still love it. And, so yes, that's a long way of saying that I am very grateful, and I do understand and realize how lucky I am to get to do this as a living. And the grass is greener from that respect. With that being said, there is, to that point, some shitty things that go along with reptile breeding. I'm always busy, always busy. So I love to travel. Traveling is super hard to do with what I do, because going out of town is extremely stressful. I do have a girl, high school girl. She actually just graduated, so she's not in high school anymore, but she works 20 to 30 hours a week for me. So that's nice, because that's just been over the last year and a half, and that's allowed me to travel a little bit again. but that's one thing that sucks about being a reptile keeper. Anytime you go out of town, it's just there's such a high
Yeah, it's
level
a
of
nightmare.
stress and
Mm.
stuff like that. And being somebody that loves to travel, that sucks. I'm always busy. That's good and bad. Like I don't check out of the day at 5 o'clock. I feed my
Mm.
geckos after my kids go to sleep at night. I go out and water and feed all my geckos. And so it's kind of constant, always going. There's always something that needs to be done. So that kind of sucks at times. It gets old always having stuff to do and always being busy and whatnot. Um, but man, like I said, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I would not go back to a 40-hour a week gig, even making
Mm.
double what I make now breeding reptiles. Just because I love it. This is my dream job. And yeah, I get to live it every day. So I couldn't be more happy and grateful, I guess, for the way things have turned out.
You can
So
definitely, obviously, you and I don't know each other. We've just got to know each other over the last like week or so, or whatever it's been.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but I find when you have these long 3 hour, 20 minutes and 30-second talks with people, you
yeah,
really you connect with people on a different level rather than just like over Facebook message. Because obviously you can't not be yourself over the space of 3 hours. So you have to sort of be
yeah,
yourself. And
yeah,
one thing I have picked up on, which I'm sure everybody has, is how incredibly grateful you are. Because from what I can understand, you've clearly put a lot of work in to get to where you are. Because I think a lot of people, for example, the only thing I can relate it to is, for example, my social media following on Instagram. I've got 26,000 odd now. Now a lot of people look at that and go, "Oh my god, wow, you've made it." If we're just saying that,
right.
you've
Yeah,
got lots of followers, and a lot of people forget that I started on zero, the same as everybody else in the world. Um,
yep,
and you've got to put in the work, and you almost sometimes do take it for granted. Like I recently started a social media page for my boss, and I posted a reel for him, and I think it got like 300 views. And from an account that had no followers, I was quite happy with that, and a landscape that I don't understand, so I was quite happy with that.
yep,
But when I posted it, it took like 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes to get one like. Whereas when I post a reel in a minute, it has 50 likes. And
yep,
I
yep,
was like, oh shit, that's where I used to be. And
yep,
sometimes
yep,
you forget. But anyway, back to my point. You can tell that clearly you've put a lot of work in, and you've given up a lot of time and energy and money and sacrifice to get to where you are now, and you're reaping the rewards of it. So rightfully so, fair play to you, hats off. But you've also not lost your humbleness and your gratefulness and your gratitude to the situation, which I think is incredibly commendable. And the question I would like to ask you, which is a really left field question, but this is where my brain goes, is with your family, your lovely wife and your beautiful children, when you were full-time engineer and reptiles, in comparison to now, how much more, if might not be different, it might be the same, but how much more present are you with them in comparison to your old life to your new life?
Okay, so that's a really cool question. So first off, thank you for the kind words you said in there. And that is, and I probably didn't elaborate on this very much, being focusing on the reptile side of
Yeah,
things,
yeah, of
but
course, yeah.
that was a very, very big factor that weighed into when my wife and I kind of finally made this decision that I was going to pursue this full time. Was and it was both ends of the spectrum, right? Like on my end of the spectrum, I love being a dad, so you asked me what my job is, right? I breed reptiles, but number one, I'm a dad, right? I want to raise my kids, to be good human beings when they grow up, like my parents did for me. And I've wanted to be a dad for my whole, like, for a long time. Like
Yeah, yeah,
I've
yeah.
always wanted kids. So it's always been important for me to be a very, very good father, very good dad, be here for my kids and stuff like that. So admittedly, that was a huge factor when my wife and I finally made the decision that I was going to do this full time. And it was two sides of the coin. It was, my job was very demanding, and the reptiles were becoming more and more and more demanding, and I was growing, and I was just losing family time. I didn't have enough time with my kids. I didn't have enough time for myself either, but I certainly didn't have enough time for my kids and family. And so all the household duties and responsibilities and kid duties and stuff like that was falling on my wife. And quite frankly, she was a professional too. So she went to school to be a civil engineer, and so she wants to have a professional career. I wanted to have a professional career, but obviously raising kids was extremely important to her too. And so we were at a spot when I finally made the transition that it just, quite frankly, wasn't going to be feasible long term anymore to keep doing it the way we were, because she was doing all the kids stuff and all the house stuff and all the stuff that went along with running a family, and I was working and doing reptiles, and that was basically it. So our family dynamic is way, way, way better now than it was then, and it's different. So I don't really, and back near the end I didn't anymore either, but I don't really have weekends. So like Saturdays and Sundays are kind of work days for me, because that's when I'm catching up, because my wife's home, so she's spending a lot of time with the kids, and we still do stuff on the weekends. I don't have to work all the time on the weekends, but just the balance of the kids is so much better. So my wife works Mondays and Wednesdays and Thursdays, so I know that on those days I'm not going to do a ton of reptile stuff. I still have a few hours of stuff I have to do on those days, but I try and spend as much time as I can with the kids. And so I ship reptiles. The kids join me with taking all my animals to FedEx every day, and they help me pack stuff, and they enjoy digging for eggs with me and stuff like that. So yeah, just the dynamic of the split between my wife and I, the way I'm doing it now, is so much better than it ever has been. And that's another reason I'm so grateful for it. It's different. We don't have a normal schedule, I guess, but we certainly make it work for our family, and yeah, it works for us. So it's really good.
The reason I ask is because I've spoken about it on here before. So I say I'm a single dad. I have a girlfriend, but Fiona isn't the mother to my child. So I say I'm a single dad. Obviously I have a partner, but and my son he'll be 6 in November.
Cool.
He stays with me on the weekends. But like, I keep reptiles. I breed reptiles. I'm really trying to do social media. I would love for my social media to become my full-time job, and the same as you with your reptiles, without putting in work. So every Sunday, I put, let's just say, 3 to 5 hours aside to do this, and I every week show up every week. Instagram post every day, YouTube video outside of the podcast every week. And it's a lot. And like anyone that does anything, it's a lot. As well as all my reptiles, as well as trying to be a boyfriend, as well as trying to be a dad. And as of lately, and I'm talking like the last week or two, I've had a real shift where I've gone, well, I'm neglecting the people I love to chase this what, like, don't get me wrong. I'm sure if and when I make it, if I ever make it, hopefully I do, it will be worth it. And you'll look back and go, fucking hell, that was all so worth it, because now for the rest of our days, I can be present. Whereas my biggest flaw as a human, she's not listening to this anymore. She's probably asleep, so we're safe. But my biggest flaw as a human is I'm very bad boyfriend, because I'm so involved in the social. I'm so involved in the animals. I'm so involved. Like, I come home from work and I'm pent up because I don't like my job. And I'm pretty good at not taking it out on people around me, but it's obvious I'm in a bad mood. So I'm not snappy or shitty, but it's obvious I'm in a bad mood, and I know that I am. And then I'm straight into the animals. And I want to do all the animals. And Fee, for the most part, like I say, she is great, but she's not into reptiles. I can't expect her to be into reptiles. My son is just starting to get into bugs. So today we went and brought a glass terrarium, and we built a wood lice, an isopod enclosure. together, which was really nice because we don't ever do stuff together. And that was the first time he's ever wanted to do stuff. And then we did like a little bug hunt in the garden. So that's slowly coming into place. But that's the reason I asked, because I do sometimes question myself, like, why the fuck am I doing this? I know why I'm doing it, to try and build a future for my family. And selfishly not have to work my job anymore, if I'm completely honest, and just love what I'm doing. But I don't think a lot of people realize.
So I'm gonna make a couple comments because you struck a few chords in there, because, and I probably kind of said this, but maybe not directly. There were many times over the last 5 years specifically when I'm cleaning gecko shit at midnight and I got to wake up at 5 a.m. the next morning for a real work meeting and stuff like that. There were a lot of times, or I'm, on the weekends, my friends are going out of town for a golf tournament or whatever, and I know I can't because I've got a friggin' million animals to take care of before I have to, go back to work Monday for my real job. There were, more times than I can count, sitting up at night cleaning gecko cups at midnight, tired as shit, and thinking like, what am I doing? What am I doing? And why am I doing this? Like, I could just sell all my reptiles and live a normal life and work 50 hours a week and think of all the time I would have and how much happier I would be and how much less stress I would have and blah, blah, blah. And those thoughts all the time. And I mean, there are so many times that I was close to just, selling everything. And like, you know what? I'm just going to live my normal life, work a normal job. I'm going to let go of the reptiles. I'm going to let go of the dream. I'll never retire early. Those doubts, those thoughts, if you will, are always present. And especially at midnight when you got to wake up at 5 a.m. the next day to, go to work. So with all that being said, and to that point, I'm obviously so glad I didn't, because I did kind of make it and got to the point where now I'm not. And I think you and I sound very similar. I was kind of in the same boat with the job, where it's like I was just sick of waking up every day doing something I didn't really care that much about. So why did I keep going all the time? Well, for one, it's because, yes, I hated cleaning gecko shit at midnight when I had to wake up at 5 a.m, but it wasn't because I hated cleaning gecko shit. It was because I hated the fact that I had to do it and I had to wake up at 5 a.m, right? So what kept me doing it is the fact that, even on a bad day when I started playing around with the geckos, it was like, okay, this is why I love these things and this is why I love what I do. I can get through it. And the idea of not having to work and wake up every day and go to a job anymore, and maybe this, becoming what it has become, that kept me going. And again, I'm thankful that I kind of got through what I did, but I also, I'm lucky, and I'm not gonna lie about it. I'm not gonna kind of beat around the bush. If I would have never bought those Kimberleys, I don't know if I'd ever be in this position.
Well, the thing is, go on.
Well, and I was just gonna say, and to your point, and you've made this comment, if I didn't have a wife that was also willing to go back and wanting to be a professional, I couldn't be in this position. And so I'm lucky to be where I'm at. But to your point, I have also worked my ass off to get here.
I was about to say that. Yeah, I was about to say that. Like, the problem is with people that go, "Oh, you're so lucky. You're so lucky." Well, what luck is when preparation meets hard work. Like, so you had you worked to the point where you could get those Kimberleys. Because if you, for example, let's just say a group of Kimberleys came available tomorrow here in the UK, I wouldn't want them because they're not for me. But argument's sake, I can't afford them. I haven't got the space for them. I hadn't. Like, but then if a brand came up to me tomorrow to say, "Hey, we were looking for someone in the UK to promote our product. Who's got the most followers of all the monitor keepers?" Yeah, boy. So but I didn't wake up with all the followers.
Exactly.
So you have to put the work in. You have to do the hard work, and an opportunity will come across the table. And it's sometimes the opportunity is luck that the opportunity comes up. You have to put
Yep.
the work in, no matter what feat of life you're looking at this. You
Yep.
have to put the work in to be prepared for that moment of luck. Because if you can't take the luck, then it's not, it's not there to be taken. You have to be able to have the what was there? There's a pair of black trees here in the UK at the moment, and long story short, they're cheap, and I can get them cheaper than they're listed for because I've spoken to the people.
Yep.
They're quite old, and the space, it's just not the right time for me.
Yep.
Fast forward 2 years, if it came up, it could be a different situation. But I'm a strong believer of what's meant for you won't pass you, and if you're
Sure.
meant to have it, it'll come. And
Yep.
I don't dwell too much on the shit I've missed rather than the shit that I've achieved.
Yep.
Because I think again, I'm only human. There are times I'm like, oh fuck's sake, I wish I had the money. I'm not gonna sit here like I'm a saint and be like, oh yeah, it doesn't water for ducks back. I get down and I get miserable and I'm like, fucking hell, like why the fuck? And I think for what you're doing and what I'm trying to do, I think it is important just to mention it like we have. It isn't always sunshine and rainbows, because when, for example, let's just say this was a 2-minute interview and you're like, oh my god, yeah, I love my life, it's so great, I have all this time, I work with reptiles and my family dynamic's great and this, that, and the other. But over the course of 3.5 hours, you've gone, well, fucking out, this guy said to work his arse off to get here. And a lot of times people younger, the generation below myself, so I'm sadly encroaching 30, but the generation that are leaving school, the 15 to 16-year-olds, they look at these social media people and they go, oh, look at the followers, or he works with reptiles full time. And they almost get set up for a false narrative because people don't really voice how hard it is. And it's not your job or my job to be like, oh, by the way, guys, it is a real slog to get here. But I do think it is important just to highlight the grind, because when you're at the top looking down, or sorry, when you're at the bottom looking up, it all looks great. But when you're at the top looking down, you realize all the fucking shit, the gecko shit you have cleaned out at midnight.
Yep. Yeah. No. Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. It's. I mean, very few people in life get things just handed to them, right? And it's a matter of figuring out what you want to do and how hard you're willing to work at it and what you want to put into it, and yeah. So I mean, yeah, I couldn't agree more with what you said.
No, I think you were you're spot on with what you said about it, to be fair. Like when you were saying that it's not that you didn't want to clean the gecko shit, you just didn't want to wake up at 5 to do the job you didn't want to do. But
Right.
I relate a lot to that, and I hadn't really thought about it, because sometimes I'll be making a YouTube video and I'm like, oh fucking this is this, but I'm stressed because I haven't got enough time to make a YouTube video
Exactly.
because I have to work the day job.
Exactly.
So it's not the YouTube, but the YouTube's just the tunnel vision. It's the bigger picture that's pissing me off. Yeah, that's it's deep shit, man. Especially at fucking 20 to 12 at night. It's deep shit.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, yeah. Your audiences have a lot to ponder before they go to bed.
Us UKians, most UK people, there's a couple of UK people who be awake still, but thankfully for me, I'm relatively nocturnal. 12, 1 o'clock, I normally go to bed. I'm up at 6, so I run on like 5 hours sleep, sadly. But yeah, we are going to start wrapping up. At the very end, I have two wrap-up questions. But before we do wrap up, two pre-wrap-up questions. One, is there anything else you want to touch on? And two, is there anything else is there anything you would like to ask me?
No, so admittedly, like we obviously didn't do. This was a pretty high level discussion, which was great. Because to that point, there's not a ton of people that know what I do or what I keep and stuff. So this is the first ever podcast I've ever done. So it was awesome. I enjoyed it. It was good to talk about what I keep and stuff. The one comment I was going to make is if, I don't know how many repeat people you get, but sometime in the future, maybe after I get some of these cages done, if you guys ever want some kind of tour, that's something we could, I'd be happy to set up. I got to figure out my technology a little bit better because I'm not a
It's
technological
fine, man.
person. But yeah,
Yeah, you're more
it
honestly
was,
more than welcome, mate. I've loved this. And like I said to you when we spoke the other day, I have no direction for this, and I'm
yeah,
happy with how this has gone because I think this is a lot of stuff that people don't talk about, which I think is quite nice to speak about.
yeah,
So I would love to have you back on to discuss little
yeah,
subtleties in breeding and keeping
nuances
and
and
care
yeah,
and
sure.
stuff like that.
Yep, yep.
Um, I would. So I don't know if you know this person. Sheffield. So I'm assuming he's a UKian. Reptiles. Great interview. Bryan is the goat for monitors. Glad he's getting out here and not hiding all the awesome stuff he's
Yeah,
doing.
Hunter, he's a good, somewhat local buddy of mine. So
Oh,
thank you.
okay. But yeah, like I say, mate, I would love to have you back on and talk about species and little bits of care. Yeah, he's not in Sheffield. Sheffield's in the UK. I'm sorry, Hunter. I don't know. All right, it's late. Leave me alone. Um, but yeah, I'd love to have you back on to talk about little subtleties. What we could do is another podcast, and then even in the future, we could do just like an Instagram live. I'll teach you how to do it. Don't worry. And then you
Yeah,
could just do it
cool.
on your phone, and we could do a little tour on the
Yeah,
Instagram
cool.
rather than the YouTube.
Cool.
But yeah, man, I'd again, I don't know when we can shoot for the
Yeah,
next couple of months.
yeah,
I know you're
yeah.
a
It's
busy
gonna.
man, so I
Yeah,
appreciate your time.
I've got weddings and stuff in August, so the summer's always busy with the kids and stuff. And my one of my uncles is getting married in August, so we're heading back up to
Okay.
Canada in August, and got some shows coming up in August and September. But yeah, maybe fall or something
Yeah,
is when
we'll
things
shoot
will kind of.
for October, November time, mate. Definitely.
Yep,
Um,
something like
we'll
that. Yeah,
I'll message you closer to the time. We'll get
cool,
something booked in. Love to have you back
awesome.
on. But again,
Yeah,
thank you. We've got the 2 wrap up questions, but thank you
sure.
for finding the time while we get done is probably going to be 4 hours. But thank you for
Yep.
finding the 4 hours to talk to me.
Yeah, man, it's
It's
been
been nice
awesome.
to get to know you. To be fair, you're absolute. I've obviously seen your stuff from afar, but
Yeah,
sounds like we both don't use Facebook all that much, and you're
no,
not that active on Instagram. Um,
yep,
but no, you're definitely a really sound, down to earth, humble, passionate. I can tell that you clearly love what you do, and you're very, very not content because I don't like the word content because it almost sounds like you're stagnant, but I'm going to use it
yep,
because I'm tired. You're like nice and content and in a good place, and you've clearly put the
yeah,
work in and you're reaping the rewards of that. And it's something to be so proud of, man, because like you say, not a lot of people get there. And I think the most humbling thing is the fact that you're humble with it. And it's not humble to say that you're humble, so I'll say it for you. But the whole way through this podcast, you've been like, yeah, I'm so lucky, I'm so grateful, I'm so blessed, I'm so thankful, I'm so lucky, I'm so happy, I'm so thankful, rather than just going, yeah, work with reptiles full time, lucky me.
yeah.
So yeah, it's a fair play, mate. Absolutely hats off to you.
Well, I appreciate it.
Right, wrap up questions. I remember. I lost my train of thought. So
No worries.
the one piece of advice you would give to someone starting the reptile hobby, so not breeding or anything like that, little Johnny or little Sally have just gone into the reptile shop to buy their first reptile, what's the one piece of advice you would give to someone just starting the reptile hobby?
Just starting the reptile
Just
hobby.
starting the reptile hobby. They could be 7 or they could be 27. We don't know. It's just starting the reptile hobby.
So this one's tough a little bit, but I'm going to say establish a relationship with your breeder if you can. Okay, so we talked about buying captive bred animals, and this is a little bit hard, but obviously you're talking to an animal breeder, so this is hard to do if you walk into a pet store and buy your first crested gecko or something like that. However, if you have the time and the ability, even if you're buying a crested gecko, I sell $50 crested geckos at shows. Not everything I do is super high end or anything like that. If you can and have the ability to get in touch with your breeder, buy your animal directly from the breeder. Of course, I'm going to say that I'm a breeder, but I know. So, for example, for me, another thing that we haven't talked about at all, which is completely fine. I I love my customers too. Like I love my animals. I'm a total people person. I was a sales engineer in my previous job. So like everything that I sell, a full live arrival guarantee, full health guarantee. If anything has any issues, I want my customers to get in touch with me right away. I want you to get the best quality animal you can. Very rarely I have an animal like go somewhere and not acclimate for a customer. I will 99% of the time just replace it for free. So not many breeders do that. That's not an excuse for shitty keepers to take shitty care of
No,
their
of course,
animals.
yeah.
That's not where I'm going with this. But I would way rather get a text from somebody, hey, this animal doesn't seem to be eating or doesn't seem to be settling in, which I get all the time from people that get an Ackie monitor the next day. Hey, it's not eating the crickets I threw in. It's like, okay, just give it a week. It's okay.
Yeah.
It'll settle in. But the point I'm trying to make is I love those interactions with my customers, and I would way rather somebody coming to me with questions than trying to look up shit on the internet and getting crappy advice. So
Yeah, and it's wrong. Yeah.
new keepers, if you have the ability, establish a relationship with a breeder or somebody knowledgeable, and don't hesitate to ask questions, because there are no dumb questions when you're coming to keeping live animals. So
That's a good one. We haven't had that one before. And
yeah,
as someone who sells animals to people, I can 100% confirm that, again, with my animals, 100% bill of health, 100%, we don't have shipping in the sense of sticking animals in
yep,
the post here. But
yep,
the animal will be healthy. You know, it comes with a lifetime guarantee in the sense that I will be there for the animal's life, not that I'm going to
yep,
replace it after 2 years. But
yep,
I'm always there at the end of the phone the whole time that animal's alive. I think that's the only way that you should be. And if you're trying to talk to a breeder and they don't want to give you the time of day, the chances are they're not the breeder for you.
yep,
Now there's a massive difference. Let's distinguish. If you're just messaging to waste people's time, and normally most people can weed out those people, but if you're generally serious about buying and you are buying, you've put deposit down and whatever the case may be, and the breeder just doesn't want to know, then the chances are you've, like you say, you've not found yourself a good breeder, especially
yep,
if you're getting, like you say, you're getting into a slightly different, more left field niche, not so much care out there. There's care on Ackies, but some of it's terrible, some of it's great. So having that relationship with the breeder that knows how to care for these animals
yeah.
is probably
And
unrivaled.
the breeder should want to help you too. Like if I sell a Prasinus, I don't want that thing to go and die in somebody's care. Like I care about all my animals and all the animals. So yeah, finding a breeder that cares can go a long way, because they want to see their animals do well too. And here's the thing, 90%, I was going to say 99%, that might be being a little bit too generous, but 90% of breeders out there are just like me. They're awesome people. They do a great job. They care about their animals and they're willing to help. Unfortunately, there's some that aren't, and are doing it just for a buck or two, but those people tend not to last in this hobby anyway. So
Yeah, this is it though, isn't it? Because, like, for example, it's very easy for me to be like, get the sales, get the sales, get the sales, but it's not. There's no longevity.
yeah,
So if you want to be somebody, you need to be somebody, and it takes
yeah,
20 years to build a good name. It takes 2 minutes to get a terrible one. So,
that's exactly right.
and then the final question has changed a million times because everyone tells me it's too morbid. So what I will ask is, what's the one piece of advice you would like to instill into your children, not reptile related?
Oh man.
I know,
Okay.
I know.
That's a big question. So the big thing, I want my children to be kind to other people. That's a big thing that I cannot stand, and I think the world does not particularly do a very good job of these days. We're all people, we're all on this planet together. So I just want to instill to my kids, I hate bullying. Like, it's just like seeing the videos of children being bullied on social media is just like disgusting and appalling and breaks my heart. So I'm very big into that. Be kind to people. You know, don't judge people. Yeah, just be kind to people. That's probably my biggest thing. I would extend that even a little bit into like animals and stuff too. I can't stand people that like I don't even just personally I don't even kill spiders and stuff. I capture them and take them outside, and that's just the way I am. But yeah, just but mainly the people. I just it's with social media these days, and just be nice, be kind to people. That's my big thing.
It's beautiful, man. So true. The world is very cruel. I had someone
Yep.
threaten me today on Instagram because we got into a little debate, and he was like, "You don't know who you're fucking talking to, bro. I've been to prison.
Yeah.
I've hurt people." I was like, "Do you think I give a fuck?"
Yeah.
But yeah, people put their neck out. Give them the time of day,
Yep.
even if
Yep.
they don't give them the time of day. Because at the end of the day, let's just use me as an example. I might be being a bit of a twat, but you don't know what I'm going through. So a little bit of
Absolutely.
kindness could snap me out of it, and I go, "Oh, fucking hell." And the same
Yep.
as me in the shop. If I see someone effing and jeffing and in a bad mood, if I just retaliate with violence, it's not going to fix anything. If I'm like, "Oh, you're
Yep.
right. What's been going on? You've been having a bad day." Could be all that person needs just to change the day around. So a little bit of
Absolutely.
kindness goes a long way, and it tends to trickle down as well. So
Yep. Yep. 100% agree.
there we go. Well, we were just
Cool.
shy of time, but we finished wrapping up. So basically, just so you know, because I didn't tell you at the start, I click end broadcast in a minute, and then in the top left hand corner where it says live, that will disappear, and then you and I will just be off. For everybody, all of Bryan's links are in the description: Facebook, Instagram, and then Morph Market. I think I found.
Yeah, so one more comment I'll make to people listening. I apologize. I am not big on Instagram. I don't post very much on Facebook. So, bear with me. Do follow the few posts that I do. I'll try and do better. But yeah, I'm not super active on any of those platforms. But yeah, certainly get in touch with me. Facebook Messenger, Facebook, Instagram. I do poke around on those. All my info is on Morph Market, phone number, text, email, stuff like that. So yeah, those are all good ways to get a hold of me. And yeah, do give me a follow on Facebook and Instagram. But I know I don't post on there a ton. I'll try and do better. But
You're a busy man. You're a busy
yeah,
man.
the only reason I don't is because I'm just out taking care of animals. So that's it.
What I find as well is you don't necessarily have to be like stupidly involved with it. You can literally just post a picture and don't put hashtags. Obviously, you're not gonna grow.
Yep.
But then at least you've got that little mini
Something.
portfolio. Yeah.
Yep.
You don't have to put the stupid amount of work in that I put into it because that's not what your end goal is.
Right.
But having that little portfolio, I mean, it sounds like you don't need it, but the way the world's going,
it
a
helps.
A lot of people look straight away to Instagram. Like I've had a few people message me, like we have like the WhatsApp groups here in the UK where you buy and sell animals, and a lot of people when I talk to about Akis or Gilleni, they're like, "Oh, have you got an Instagram?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So instantly they're like, "Oh, cool," because for some reason when you have numbers to your name, people assume that you're legit, which is a weird concept. But anyway, thanks for the great conversation, guys. That's okay, everyone. Thank Bryan so much for giving up 4 hours of his life to come and talk to us about lizards, and we'll have him back on to actually talk about lizards. But again, thank you very much. Yeah, specifics. We'll get into. Like I say, I do this little bit where I do give a little bit of kindness myself at the end of the podcast and compliment the guests. And I've already said about like how much of just a generally lovely person you are. But I think the fact that your willingness to be open about the reality of it is good, because it's very easy for you to be, let's just say, at the top for the story and just be like, yeah, I worked hard and I got there, and I think actually shining a light onto it and the reality of it and what it's taken to get you there. A few people throughout the conversation have commented and gone, "Oh my God, what a story. Oh my God, this is good." Or "I can't believe how much you've got," and all that stuff, but I just haven't bothered highlighting it. But a few people, and I know I feel watching it, I'm like, fucking hell, I'm like, yeah, you've been through the trenches with it. And I think when you listen to people, because there's not, I can think of 3 people, one now being yourself, that have shared publicly how hard it is. You know, it does put a lot of things into perspective, because like I say, when you're at the bottom looking up, it's very easy to be like, oh my God, he must be living the dream and he's so lucky and he's so this. But I think the fact that you're realistic with it, not, oh, it was so shit, it was really hard work, or yeah, it was so easy, and the fact you're just real and honest and authentic and humble resonates a lot with me, and it's given me a bit more of a motivation to be like, right, allocate time for fee, but keep pushing, keep trudging, keep doing what you're doing, and it's sort of worth it, and the hard work pays off, So I think most of all, I thank you for that, but thank you for your time, because I know what it's like to be busy, because I don't seem to have a minute in the day anymore. And I've loved your company, mate. Hopefully you've loved mine, and hopefully it was worth it. First podcast. How was it?
It's been
Good?
awesome, man. Yeah, it was great. It was awesome. It was
Good.
awesome.
I'm glad.
I must be making it big time now if I'm getting invited on podcasts. So
your name was thrown around quite a bit, because obviously I dabble on the Tree Monitor pages. Not really Booker's drama, but I do dabble. And if your name was thrown around a few times, and
cool.
Then I'll be completely honest. I've been aware of your page for a couple of years, definitely, but didn't know the extent.
Yeah,
like
the
I
breadth
said earlier
of everything. Yeah,
not a clue. And a few people did comment when you were listing the species of monitors. I must have been like,
yeah. I told you I probably had a few more than you knew of. Yeah,
you definitely had at least a few. Yeah, don't forget to send me the Gilleni pictures as well. I'm gonna go to bed.
Yeah,
but in the morning I'll take a look at them. But yeah,
for sure.
The fact that I think the fact that you've got so much as well, and you're still so humble with it, is again a true show of character for yourself, mate. So fair play to you.
Appreciate
and
it.
Massive shout out to your wonderful wife as well.
Yeah, I'll tell her. I'll let her listen to this maybe.
We all need a good lady behind us.
That's absolutely right.
They rule the world, but we'll never tell them.
No.
Well, if you don't have any final words, we'll wrap this up.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Like, comment, subscribe. Check Bryan out. I don't care if you're in the UK, Europe, or America. Give him a follow. Let's get his followers up. And yeah, this has been your boy on Captive Raptors Podcast. I'll see you next Sunday. Peace out.